Welcome to our regular business meeting for the Board of Education in Lewis Palmer School District 38. It's a historic meeting, given that it's 2/2/22 on Taco Tuesday. So we'll never have such a day again, so it's historic, and we welcome you. Mr. Schwartz is dialed in on the phone, and he'll be participating. Miss Upchurch is on her way, but Slick Roads has detained her slightly, so she'll show up here in a few minutes, hopefully. To view this meeting's presentation documents, please access Board Docs. The link to the Board Docs website can be found via the D38 website on the Board of Education /meetings webpage. To view the live stream video of this meeting, please go to the Lewis Palmer School District number 38 YouTube page. Ms. Wood, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Clausen?
Here.
Ms. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Schwartz?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
And Ms. Upchurch will be here shortly.
Thank you. If you could join me now, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I will second that motion, Mr. Taylor.
Comments or questions? Ms. Wood?
Mr. Clausen?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Do you want to get
Hi, Ms. Upchurch.
Ms. Upchurch's vote?
Thanks for letting us know about the weather. And welcome, most importantly. We're going to jump right into our agenda. B1 is our first item, and I would like to ask Dr. Summers and Teresa Phillips to do the first two items, actually.
Sure, I'll take the lead on the first one. So we have, I believe, Mr. Steve Waldman here with us. Mr. Waldman, if you could please join us up here at the mic. So Mr. Waldman is a District 38 parent and chess team coach, and he's going to speak to us this evening about the recent 15th annual Lewis Palmer School District chess tournament that was held, I believe, this Saturday at Lewis Palmer Elementary School. So Mr. Waldman, without further ado.
Great, thank you. It was 2 Saturdays ago at Lewis Palmer Elementary School, and we had 85 students in the chess tournament. That's pretty much average of what we have every year. We did not have a tournament last year because of the COVID, so it was good to get back there and do the chess tournament again. And it seems that every year the chess tournament just goes smoother and smoother, and it's easier to run. And that's due to all the help I get from volunteers through the district. Without the volunteer help, there's no way we could get it done. So I'd like to thank some of the volunteers who really kicked in and helped us do it. And first, I'd like to thank Annette Bass, who's the gifted education coordinator for the district. She just did tremendous work for us. And then I'd like to thank some GT teachers, Anita Hsu from Bear Creek Elementary School, Jennifer Skalko from Bear Creek Elementary School, Jennifer Mitchell from Lewis Palmer Elementary School. And then I'd like to thank Devon Johnson, the principal at Lewis Palmer Elementary School, for letting us take over her school for a day and not mess the whole thing up. When we did this, we had about 20 Key Club kids from Lewis Palmer High School and Palmer Ridge come in and help us run the tournament. And they are just wonderful. They're so positive and just really helpful to do anything. And so I'd like to thank the the Key Club people, Missy Monroe from Palmer Ridge, Mike Luganbill from Palmer Ridge, and Max Williams from Lewis Palmer High School. Then we had to set up all the tables and move everything around. And Trevor, the custodian at Lewis Palmer Elementary School, he was just magnificent. He was extremely helpful the whole day and the day before when we set up. And he was a very positive person. When we did the tournament, I was the tournament director, but I was too busy kind of running the show. So when the kids played, if any issues rose up in their game with their opponent, they had to raise their hand and have a chess referee come over and mediate the situation, figure out what was going on. So we had 3 referees. One was Braden Turner, a student, and then we had Eric Scott and Steve Clark, who were referees too, and they were very helpful. And then finally, I'd like to thank my wife, Cindy Waldman, who's a reading instructor at Bear Creek Elementary School. And every year, without her help, there's no way we could get this done. So it was just tremendous. And so, like I said, we had 85 kids this year. And the best thing about the tournament is just the sportsmanship. Before every game, they shook their opponent's hand, wished them good luck. And then at the end of the game, they shook their opponent's hand and thanked them for having a good game. We played 4 rounds. Everyone played 4 rounds. They got medals and trophies. We gave trophies to the first 3 places in each grade. Unfortunately, because of the snow, we don't have many trophy winners here today, but we do have 2, and I'd like to have them recognized for their achievement. So, second grader here, we have Charles Buhite from Bear Creek Elementary School. And then we have, in 5th grade, we have first place Jack Buhite from Bear Creek Elementary School. And both those boys just did a wonderful job, as well as all the other people. And so I really want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to come back and do this every year, because it's a positive thing, and without your support and without the support of the volunteers, there's no way we could do it. So I really, really appreciate your assistance. So thank you.
Thank you very much as well. I think we're going to present you with a card as well as get a couple pictures.
Okay, good deal. Okay, thank you.
Out of the way. You hold that. I'll hold that. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Good evening. I have the honor to recognize Lewis Palmer High School senior Rihanna Lingle, who is here with us this evening. She was recently announced as the string soloist with Denver Young Artists Orchestra for a May 8th performance up north. I wanted to just tell you a little bit about her. Rihanna's played violin since she was 4. She has a dream of being a professional chamber musician. And Rihanna, I think you are well on your way, personally. She has studied violin to the point that she has already studied at the prestigious Curtis Institute of Violin and Music. And she is joining us tonight so that she can also be not just recognized, but also perform for all of us. So Rihanna, without further ado, I know you wanted to introduce your piece. And I also wanted to recognize that her parents are here this evening. Eric and Erica Lingle are here with us. Thank you for being here. And so, Rihanna, I'm just going to pass the baton to you, so to speak. And I'd just like to add that Rihanna has applications in for violin performance at 9 schools? That's okay, at 7 schools. And so we would look forward to hearing back from you as to where you end up going to college next year, and we wish you all the best. And on behalf of the Board of Education, thank you for being here, and thank you so much for your contributions to Lewis Palmer High School and to District 38 as you grew up.
Mom and Dad gotta get in there, come on now.
Ron said he lost the connection.
Nicely done, guys, thank you. Thanks again.
I think we're done, aren't we? That was perfect. Is there more business? Let's see, is the sign-up sheet over here?
Oh, yes, I can get it, Chris.
I'll get it. Ron, are you there?
All set, thank you.
At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. Per board policy BEDH, public participation at school board meetings, all regular and special meetings of the board shall be open to the public because the board desires to hear the viewpoints of all citizens throughout the district and also needs to conduct its business in an orderly and efficient manner. It shall schedule time during board meetings for brief comments from residents and property owners of the district, parents, and employees. There is one time for public comment, and it is limited to 30 minutes. In an effort to allow all who wish to speak, the amount of time dedicated to each speaker will be dependent on the number of people who sign up, with the entire public comment period not exceeding 30 minutes. If 10 or fewer sign up, each person will have 3 minutes to address the board. The board respects the rights of the public to speak on matters concerning the operation of the schools. We believe that public comments that are critical of district staff, however, often cause unnecessary harm to those employees and to the education of our students. As a result, we prefer that members of the public share any criticism of employees in writing with the superintendent, who is responsible for supervising all staff and then involving the board as necessary. If you choose instead to address a personnel issue publicly, please understand that the board does not endorse the comments of any speaker and reminds all who speak that they assume the risk of legal action by district employees in the event the affected employees believe that any comments about them violate legal standards. In addition, speakers may be asked to appoint a spokesperson if the topic is a group concern. Lastly, please keep in mind, we may have K through 12 students in the audience. Please keep all comments appropriate to our audience. I think we have 8, but I'll just start at the top. Megan Pemberton.
My name is Megan Pemberton. I'm a mom of 4 children attending school in D38. I'm speaking tonight after observing last month's board meeting, reading the proclamation by Monument Academy, and hearing much of the subsequent public commentary. My eldest child came out to my husband and me when she was 12 years old. I later found out this was precipitated by a classmate outing her to her friends, a truly traumatic experience for her. She was scared to share with us after that, not knowing how we would react. I reassured our child that our love is unconditional and we are proud of who she is. When our second child came out, they did so without fear or fanfare via text message. I've stood in awe over the last several years as my kids have come into their own and unabashedly shown the world their true selves. I imagine most, if not all of you on the board are parents. Many of you may have LGBTQ kids, and like me, you want what's best for your kids. The Trevor Project estimates that at least one LGBTQ youth between the ages of 13 to 24 attempts suicide every 45 seconds in the United States. This risk drops by 40% when youth have one affirming adult in their lives. Who are the affirming adults with our kids 8 hours every day? How are they able to identify themselves? Because without them, our children's survival is at risk. A few weeks ago, my second child came home from school absolutely beside themselves. See, this child is gender fluid, has short hair, and dresses to support however they're feeling that day. Another young person at the middle school had approached them and told them they should be ashamed of being queer and they should just go ahead and kill themselves. I was shocked. In my naivete, I truly believed that we were teaching our children to do better, to be better. I sadly do not believe my children's experiences are unique. I believe that if you asked any of the young people sitting behind me tonight or any of the kids at our schools that identify as LGBTQ, they would share that they too have experienced much of the same hate, anger, and vitriol as my children, many on a daily basis. Having listened to last month's board meeting, I heard many people say that no place for hate club at the middle school is indoctrinating our children and turning them gay. I heard that pride flags should be removed from our middle school. No one can turn you gay, just as no one can turn you straight. And pride flags show our kids that they are safe, loved, and accepted. This board has a mission: every child, every day. If you choose to remove pride flags from our schools and remove a club that preaches inclusion and love for not only LGBTQ youth, but youth of different races and religions, you are not only failing in your mission of every child, every day, you're setting a dangerous precedent of hatred, intolerance, and bigotry. Now that you know the suicide risks in our kids, the onus is on you, the board, to make the best decisions for them. I plead with this board and our schools to reevaluate protections for our LGBTQ kids. Look at the faces sitting in front of you tonight. These kids need our help. They need our support. They need our love. I, for one, will no longer be content to be an ally. I will be an advocate forevermore, and I will do everything in my power to make sure my children and all children feel safe at school. I implore you all to join me. Our kids' lives depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Pemberton?
Well, thank you, board, Dr. Summers, Ms. Wood. My name is Bob Pemberton. I am a father of 4 kids who go here at the Lewis Palmer School District. I'm also a former Christian missionary. I spent 2 years preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ to the people who lived in Rio de Janeiro. For those of you on the board and in the audience who identify as Christians, the Christian faith tradition teaches us to treat others the way we want to be treated and to love our neighbors as ourselves. We also looked at how Christ ministered and showed unconditional love to all those around him. And I wonder as a parent how we could do the same. 2 of my kids are members of the LGBTQ community, one in high school, one at the middle school. My high schooler comes home every day and tells me about the slurs that she hears about kids at the school because their hair is different, their skin is different, because they do not identify as straight white people. My middle schooler, who identifies as non-binary, was told by a very proud Christian boy that they should be ashamed of themselves and kill themselves for being different. Jesus taught that inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. And ladies and gentlemen, these kids are those least of these that Christ was talking about. There's plenty of controversy and disagreement about the pride flag and its place in our schools. Plenty of school districts across the country have actually banned these symbols and other signs of historically marginalized students. Some on the board and in the audience may see the pride flag as a political statement, but for LGBTQ students who disproportionately experience discrimination in school buildings, symbols such as the pride flag can be useful tools for navigating their social and physical surroundings. LGBTQ students experience stronger academic outcomes as well as more positive emotional and mental health outcomes when their schools are inclusive and affirming. And it is visible displays of support for LGBTQ students like pride flags that are all critical components of creating this welcoming environment, one that helps young people be successful in schools. In schools where these students are forced to remain in the closet, similar to the bill going on in the Florida state, anxiety, depression, and suicides all increase. Governor Polis recently said that when a group of people, LGBTQ youth, feel targeted by the words and laws that some politicians espouse, of course it increases anxiety and depressions. So what would Jesus do? He would go after the lost sheep. He would be the good Samaritan. He would clothe the naked, feed the hungry, and give water to the thirsty. Now each of you, along with myself, believe in the district's principle of every student, every day. And I did notice President Taylor had posted on his LinkedIn profile, our schools are made up of Americans from many different races, religions, national origins, and I will add sexual orientations. And talking against someone because of their sexual identity or religion, and even their lack of religion, is un-American. So let's keep our schools all American. Let's keep our schools a welcoming and safe environment for all students, regardless of their sexual orientation, race, religion, or national origin. We can all do better. We can all be kinder and more Christ-like. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Veda Overbaugh, did I pronounce that right? Veda? Okay, thank you. Kara Martin?
Good evening, Casey and the rest of the board. In the nearly 7 years we've lived here, there have been a lot of topics that I've watched at these board meetings from the safety and security of my own home. And there have been a lot of things that have made me shake my head. But it wasn't until I heard the parents were coming down here to get the board to remove a no place for hate, anti-bullying education curriculum out of our middle school that made me decide that it was finally time that we had come to a time where I needed to come speak. To take an anti-bullying curriculum out of our middle school after I had already sent one child through the middle school and was getting ready to send my second child out of 4 to the middle school, made me realize that the board hadn't heard from a lot of the community. A lot of the community that is in the weeds is busy. I've got 4 children. Tonight alone, if my husband wasn't home and was flying, I wouldn't be able to be here tonight. You've got a lot of parents who would support this curriculum, who would come and tell you about it, but we're busy. 90% of the volunteer work is done by 10% of the people. We're busy. But please do not mistake the silence for apathy. Listen to the words, anti-bullying campaign. Now, many of you may not know what exactly is involved in no place for hate bullying curriculum. And I would venture to guess that many of the people who have spoken against it probably didn't do what I did. I reached out to the middle school. I reached out to the guidance counselor and said, hey, can you send me the curriculum so I know what I'm speaking about? Below are the activities that we are doing for the No Place for Hate this year. The main thing we focus on is promoting positivity and belonging at LPMS. We want each student to feel confident in themselves so they are able to stand up when they see something wrong happening and to feel like they can include all students so no one feels left out. If you need anything else, let me know. Okay, well, I wanted to know what that meant. Chalkboard quotes. Each quote on a hallway chalkboard each month to promote positive and student engagement around positive topics and discussions. Compliment cards. Each student in the building will receive a compliment card before the end of the year. They are generic messages of encouragement with students' names on them to personalize them as much as possible. Question of the week. Students are asked a question over the announcement each week to encourage positive discussions about being an upstander and an ally in regards to topics such as bullying, inclusion, and getting information to students about how to deal with real-world situations that they are facing. Our first question, what color best represents you and why? What does it mean to be an outstander and an ally? You have parents coming out in ice and snow to fight against this curriculum? Makes me think that there's a lot of parents who've put their emotions behind something they never looked into. Every generation has something they need to answer to their children about. My grandparents had to answer to interracial dating. My parents had to answer to us about gay rights. Now we need to answer for transgender rights. What are you going to answer to your children? These are two separate things. No Place to Hate is asking for inclusion. Maybe you should separate them, because it sounds like parents in our community aren't separating them from No Place to Hate.
Thank you. Theo Martin?
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Theo, but it hasn't always been. When I was in 6th grade, I came out, and since then, I've been outed, I've been bullied, I've been called slurs in the hallways, and generally, I became the target of a lot of homophobia, specifically in our middle school. And you know what that led to? Suicide attempts. Lots of them. I couldn't go to anyone, because I didn't know what teachers were safe. I didn't know who would have supported me, and when I did, I got told to ignore it. I didn't have pride flags on the walls. My teachers didn't have safe space signs. I wasn't indoctrinated, and I'm still me. I'm sorry that people in this community are so incredibly selfish that they do not want to sacrifice their comfort to save the lives of the students in this district. With the suicide rate in this community, I'm surprised that a mental health and anti-bullying program would have so many naysayers. Mr. Taylor, we are not separating ourselves because we are special. The reason that this has a place in our school system is only because people think that we are less than. You said that your goal as a board member is to make sure that the children have a safe environment. You want them to be able to express themselves and learn, and that is all this is. This program creates a safer and more welcoming space for the young LGBT children in this community. This program is not bullying anyone. It is not indoctrinating anyone. It is not making your children gay, and it is certainly not taking away your freedom. But it is giving students a place to be themselves and to be comfortable with themselves and their identity. Rainbows are not a symbol of the LGBT coalition. They are not a political symbol, and they are not some sort of Satanist flag. And yes, those are all things that I have heard in our school system. No, they are a symbol of strength in this community. They are a symbol of community, of justice. They are a symbol of identity, one that you cannot take away. Denying acceptance, expression, and whatever you want will not erase our identities. We are not some sort of attack on religion, and we are not something that you can choose to not tell your children about. We are people, whole beings with importance in this world, and I am begging the board, the school district, and whoever else with this power to not take it away. This can only benefit the student body. Promoting acceptance and identity and encouragement is not a negative, and it will never be. Continuing to promote acceptance and to stop bullying in our community is not a con. It is not some sort of thing that you should take away because you think it's taking away your religion, because it's not. No Place for Hate is a place for no hate. And saying that you're against it is saying that you want your students to be hated. You want them to be bullied. If you think of the words anti-bullying campaign and you're anti that, well, two negatives make a positive, and you've just done yourself and you've shown your true colors. I am begging you once again and once more to not take this away from our student body, because it can do nothing but help. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Waldman?
I'm Steve Waldman, and I'm the parent of a young man who attended schools in Lewis Palmer School District for 13 years and graduated from Lewis Palmer High School. My wife has taught for the school district for over 20 years. On February 10th, the Monument Academy School Board issued a proclamation. I'm going to read you a part of that proclamation. The board firmly believes that any laws passed by the United States Congress and the Colorado General Assembly that mandate specific instruction or that direct Monument Academy to follow specific instruction regarding non-biological gender expression and/or gender identity in determining the use of biological sex-specific common bathrooms, biological sex-specific common locker rooms, and participation in biological sex-specific athletic sports violate natural law moral truth, and expose our students to undue harm, confusion, and dysphoria. The Monument Academy Board essentially proclaimed that a transgender student using a bathroom of their gender identity violates natural law and moral truth. What arrogance. As you should be aware, just last year, the United States Supreme Court allowed a U.S. Court of Appeals ruling to stand in which the Court of Appeals said that under federal law, a transgender student is entitled to use the bathroom that corresponds to their gender identity. The Monument Academy Board has proclaimed that that violates natural law and moral truth. 75 years ago, many white people in the South believed that it violated natural law and moral truth for colored children to use the same bathroom that white children use. Those white people were on the wrong side of history. The board's proclamation would not be so troubling if it was the policy of a radical fundamentalist religious cult located in a compound in rural Montana. However, it's the policy of a public school in our very own community. 30 years ago, Colorado Springs became known as a city of hate when radical elements helped pass Amendment 2, which prohibited municipalities from enacting anti-discrimination laws against the gay community. Those elements were on the wrong side of history. It took Colorado Springs a long time to overcome the stench from their involvement in that hateful amendment. The Monument Academy Boards Act is just as hateful. It is analogous to saying that it violates natural law and moral truth for Christian and Jewish children to be educated together. I think that at a minimum, Lewis Palmer School District should demand that the proclamation be rescinded, and that if it's not, then Lewis Palmer School District should initiate action to revoke Monument Academy's charter. Hate and intolerance have no place within our community. The stench needs to be eliminated. Don't let Lewis Palmer School District be on the wrong side of history. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Heater?
Hello. First of all, I heard through the grapevine that the teachers were given some compensation raises, so thank you for that piece for your teachers. I'm here tonight for two reasons. One is a taxpayer, one is a parent of a student. As a taxpayer, boy, I'm concerned about the proclamation by Monument Academy. If they were a private school and their actions had no bearing on our district, it really would be none of my business what happens there. To my understanding, and if I'm wrong, I apologize, but to my understanding, Monument Academy operates under the purview of District 38. If anyone does a lawsuit through the Office of Civil Rights, the OCR will also hold District 38 accountable. This accomplishes two things. District 38 public schools will have to invest not only financial resources to fight those lawsuits, but also the time from every one of you and every one of our admin people. Instead of looking at education, they'll need to be fighting a lawsuit, which, as every one of you knows, won't stand, and they can't win. The other part that I'm here is as a parent. And I want to distinguish right off the bat, I'm not here about the No Place for Hate. I've read the curriculum, I think it's great. I don't think it has anything to do with the LGBTQ community other than it does for the Jewish kids. I think that the people who last week, and I'll admit it, they were refreshingly honest with how they feel about the LGBTQ community. And it was nice to see that honesty not hidden behind a rock or a cloak or something. But they let it be known that the part of No Place for Hate that they totally hate is the LGBTQ piece. What I can say to you is I wrote a letter to the board. You all received it. Thank you to those who commented back. And I understand that everybody wants to teach what kids can go home and talk about in their living rooms, and parents should have control. Well, I back that 100%. As a parent, you're darn right. I should have a little control about what my student learns. But I am different than other parents. And what kids can come home to my house and talk about might be different than yours. I don't know. But if you choose, as some parents said last week, not to tell your children about gay people or families who are different until they're in college, I feel very sorry for the teachers and, quite honestly, the fellow students who are left then to educate their children. And how embarrassed would a ninth grader be to learn about a kid with two moms and find out that their own parents hid society from them? They hid the laws. I live in the United States of America, and it's the best country in the world. But we have laws, and if you don't want to obey those laws, then fight the laws. Don't fight the kids. And I'd like each one of you seriously to take a look at the kids behind us. And if you feel they don't need extra protection, which one of you is going to go up to them and say, now, I really don't think you should kill yourself, but I don't think you need protecting either. These aren't just theoretical, hypothetical kids. These are kids, and there are so many things in this world right now that are hard, that are dangerous, that are stressing out our youth, especially with COVID. Do we really want to add that? It might be a stage, it might be how they are and how they were made. I don't know, and neither do you. But do we really want to add that to the stress? Kids can only learn in a safe environment, and it's up to us to provide that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie Thompson?
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Summers. I'm Jimmy Thompson, and I've been a parent in the district now for 12 years. I have an 8th grader and a 5th grader in the district, and they go to Bear Creek Elementary and Lewis Palmer Middle School. And I'm here today because my son is a member of the No Place for Hate Club at the middle school. And if you ask him what he likes about the club, he said he likes because the students that are in it. He's like, there's so many different students, and we all think differently and have different ideas, and there's so many different perspectives and energies, and he comes home energized and with a connection that he doesn't get in other places. And over the years, I've heard parents talk about bullying and increased concerns over mental health challenges that we're seeing in our kids and young people, as you've heard previous speakers allude to. This program is self-directed. It's a collaboration program with students, teachers, administrators, and my son loves the team that he gets to work with. And this program really strengthens the student's sense of belonging, right? So the second piece I'm here is also, it's kind of tied together, is to really rescind MA's recent proclamation, because that proclamation does just the opposite of that, and it's more exclusive than inclusive. And if we as a community are concerned about mental health and the kids in our area, we really need programs that make them feel included, and No Place for Hate is that. And we need the public to speak out against programs that are more exclusive than inclusive. And you know your district priority number 1, which is to cultivate a safe, healthy, and welcoming school. And this goal can be achieved by being supportive and inclusive. So please, I ask you to support the No Place for Hate program at the middle school. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to just once again thank all the members of the public, parents, taxpayers, et cetera, for your comments tonight. We do listen, we do read the emails, and every voice matters. So thank you very much. Our next agenda item is board member comments. And tonight I'd like to start with Ron and then work toward the end. So just the opposite of what I usually do. Ron?
Yeah, no comments today. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Ron. Teresa?
I just have a short comment. First of all, I guess I have 2 comments. The first is thank you for those of you who are engaged and are here tonight. I know it's snowy out, and we really appreciate the community coming out to not only come to give public comment, but also to interact and to listen and to stay engaged. And all of you go out to our community and encourage that kind of communication further and that kind of engagement with us. So thank you very much. And also, every now and then, I happen upon something in the schools that I had no idea existed. And that happened to me last week when, 2 weeks ago, I met with Miss Laura Stamp at Lewis Palmer High School. And she has begun an entirely new tutoring center called the Revitalized Tutoring Center. I don't know if I see some heads shaking. Yes, that they've seen it. If you don't know about it and you have a student at Lewis Palmer High School, it is quite exciting. They have a whole, they created a space within space that was already being used. They have a group of students who are leading to help tutor other students, and the enthusiasm that I heard within that program was amazing, really, to hear. So amidst all the challenges that we have right now, especially hopefully at the tail end of a pandemic, and then helping our kids get back into regular routines, and also helping them with all of their academics and all of their extracurricular activities and passions, to see that school and a small group of staff went above and beyond with an effort like that was really inspiring. So please know great things are happening every day.
Well, in the spirit of snowy outside, I'm going to keep mine a little bit briefer. I'll try anyway. I'm going to do my own demonstration of learning, if that's with your permission, Mr. Taylor. So first of all, I want to say that we've been hard at work lobbying at the state for more funding for education. That is an ongoing effort in this district and around the state. As board members, our staff, parents, teachers, we are constantly advocating and lobbying for more funding for education. So if there's any rumors out there that that's not happening, that's not true. So Mr. Clausen, I'm going to ask you to help me.
Okay.
Can you take this tube of toothpaste and can you just, here, we'll give you this lid, and squeeze as much of that toothpaste out on that little thing right there.
On the lid?
Yep.
Okay.
And while Mr. Clausen's doing that, I want to share that when I moved to this school district with my children, my son is on the autism spectrum, and where we came from in Maryland, we didn't have choices, and they wouldn't put him on an IEP, and people did not understand him because he's a little different. And I'm going to be right here, right now, and I asked his permission to share this with you all. My son is also a part of the LGBT community. He was bullied by adults, and he was bullied by students. When I ran for the school board, adults that I trusted very strongly, he got to hear, my youngest got to hear things being said disparagingly about his mother, and that hurt his heart. And my children have also gone through issues where their self-esteem has been in question. And so I commend all of you students for speaking out. Thank you. And you are not alone, genuinely and truly. And the reason I asked you to do this, Mr. Clausen, is these are the words that us adults share. And these are the words that some of us kids, our kids share with each other. And they're not very kind words. Can you put those words back in that tube of toothpaste, please?
How long do I have?
The point is that when we say, our actions and our words have meaning and can hurt, and you can't put them back once they come out. So please, can we, as a community, use words of kindness, be graceful towards each other, and have love for each other. That's why, as a community, when we raise our kids and we stand behind our kids, it is up to us to protect our kids as parents and as teachers. So let's use some words of kindness and role model that to our children also. And that's all I want to say. Thank you, Mr. Clausen.
Thank you, Ms. Upchurch. I appreciate the comments of my fellow board members. Also appreciated the musical performance that we had this evening. My daughter took violin lessons from Miss Phillips for a number of years, and I have a great appreciation for anyone that could play a musical instrument. The only musical instrument I'm good at is the radio, and even then I struggle at times. I want to thank our teachers and team members for the wonderful job that they do, and I'm glad that we're able to work together as a board and as a team to find some additional funds for them. And lastly, I want to recognize two special guests that we have with us tonight. We have Holly and Leslie Taylor. Would you two stand? And the reason why I want to recognize these two, both of first of all, they're awesome. You know, Leslie goes to Palmer Ridge. She's a great student, but it is a significant commitment for anyone to serve on the board. And for me personally, the only way I'm able to cover the bases that I do is because of my wonderful wife. I still have 3 kids at home, so thank you, Holly, for allowing Chris to spend so much time serving in the district. And I guess I do have one additional comment. For the last 7+ years, my philosophy has been everything that we do is about the kids. And that philosophy continues today. I believe that every voice should be heard. I believe that there's a place for everyone in this district. And I believe that as we work together and understand the different challenges that we face individually and together, we could grow together as a district. And that's all I have, Mr. Taylor.
Thank each of the board members for your comments or passing. It will be nice to get home at a good hour tonight. I wanted to touch on something that we talked about in our work session about 2 weeks ago. And we looked at curriculum selection, the process we go through for curriculum selection. And the Lewis Palmer School District itself uses a standards-based academic curriculum. Monument Academy uses what they call a classical curriculum for academics. And they're different. They're both good, but they are different. And I encourage everyone to understand that difference. We also then talked about social and emotional learning. And we don't have as robust, I would say, curriculum process, selection process as we do with academics because it's newer, right? But our administration expressed, how it currently is working. They understand the governance that's necessary to support it, et cetera. Well, I learned a lot during that work session, and I appreciate Amber Wetstein and Dr. Summers for that education that we received about curriculum and the differences that exist in curriculum. I want to just share that I've done some studying, and then I don't want to sound like I'm an expert. I'm not. I've read 2 or 3 hours worth of social and emotional learning, so it's conversational at best. But there's a couple of interesting facts that I learned that I wanted to share. So one is students that have social and emotional difficulty, I'll just call it, 75% are at basic or below reading skills because of that shortcoming or deficit in social and emotional. And the number is 62% below in math scores. So what I've read is that how a person feels about themselves in that social and emotional setting of home, of school, of community matters on the education process and how they perform. People who are more confident, more adept at social and emotional skills, score 13% higher academically. They score 11% higher in math and 6% higher just on the graduation rate. So the facts, right? The data suggests that social and emotional learning really needs to be integral to our education system. Now, there are many sources for social and emotional curriculum. Many sources. I was surprised, frankly, how many sources there are. I just wanted to touch on one more thing here that I thought was pertinent because it supports Dr. Summer and the administration's every child, every day approach. And it's about strength-based, okay? So strength-based approach to social and emotional learning focuses on prevention rather than intervention. Rather than waiting until the problem behaviors occur Strength-based measures allow us to identify opportunities for growth proactively. Strength-based approaches also support positive relationships between educators and students, as educators are guided to view their students' strengths rather than focus on their deficits. It also helps students feel connected to school, successful, and engaged in learning. Starting with strengths helps educators and parents build on what students are already good at while it's still addressing needs. Parents also appreciate a strength-based approach, which allows them to focus on their child's strengths while working on areas of need at home, resulting in a more support and favorable outcomes for the student. I'm going to leave it there and just kind of conclude with my own thought is, you know, having raised 10 children, they're all different. It's amazing how DNA isn't the only factor. We are all unique. Every one of us are unique. Part of the education process, part of growing into adulthood, is to find your own voice. Who are you? I think the education system should be and is primarily designed to help students do that. Now, when we look at the society that we live in and the ills of society that we live in, it tells me there's a deficit for academic and social and emotional learning. Generally speaking, if we can understand better whatever the issue is, we will have more empathy. So I just want to close with, I 100% support the district's curriculum selection vetting process. Is it perfect? No. Can it be improved? Always. Will it be? I 100% believe it. But I also know that, as Mr. Clausen has said for 7 years, it's all about the kids. Now, it's important that parents are involved. It's important that teachers are involved. We love our teachers. We love our parents. But it is about the kids. And the aim for these kids is to become, I think two sessions ago we saw something that was called Portrait of a Graduate, done by 2 high school kids. One was a recent graduate, I believe. What an excellent presentation. What an excellent portrait that they produced. And that's why we're here. I would like to see a portrait of a board member. I'd like to see a portrait of a teacher. I'd like to see a portrait of a bus driver, because we should all be aligned on behalf of our children. And with that, Dr. Summers, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor, members of the board. Always a pleasure to work with you in partnership. And thank you again for all that have come out this evening. So I'm going to do something a little bit different with this particular update, in that I'd like to open the floor up to members of the executive leadership team, because as I mentioned to them this morning, I could not do what I do without how we're all doing this together. And as we spend some time in our priority updates, I think it's appropriate for each of our team members who champion each of these priorities to have a chance to also get their voice in the room. Now, with that said, and as Mr. Frampton is getting ready for priority 1, I'm going to take a little bit of an opportunity within this update to touch on one of the more unique and special awards that we've had the privilege of sharing within Lewis Palmer School District. And I'm looking at Mrs. Upchurch's reaction, because she, I know, loves this award too. So I could almost let Mrs. Upchurch, would you like to tell us about the Alliorium Day award application and process? Because I know it touches your heart very deeply.
It does touch my heart, but I'm sure Mr. Frampton can share details of dates. The Alliorium Day Awards is an award that is given out to community members, students, teachers, anyone that has gone above and beyond and touched the lives of others. It can be, anybody can submit, an individual. It is very hard not to have a tear-filled room when these awards are presented, because the testimony that comes through of how many people have touched, how many students' lives, It touches me too because I have a student that has been touched by, as I mentioned before. A lot of people didn't know him, didn't know who he was, didn't know why he was quirky or different, but a lot of members in this community rallied behind him and took care of him and loved on him, and now he's a successful individual. So that's why it touches my heart. But Mr. Frampton, I am so appreciative that this is also put on by the SEAC, the Special Education Advisory Committee.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Upchurch. This will be our 5th year of honoring those folks who touch the lives of others, especially those students with disabilities. The applications for nomination will be coming out tomorrow, and the deadline will be March 27th. So please, everybody, start paying attention to those who are making a difference in our community and our schools, and let's start making those nominations and really acknowledging those folks who are making a difference in the lives of our kids. So we're super excited about that. We will be holding the ceremony this year at Lewis Palmer High School in the auditorium. When we started this 5 years ago, our dream was to fill an auditorium full of people, and we started with a small group in this room, and it's grown and grown to the point where we've reached our dream, and we're now going to be filling up an auditorium at Lewis Palmer High School. So we're very excited about that. Second thing in priority 1 is today we had the opportunity to finish our second paraprofessional training. We had one paraprofessional training that was held during the PLC day in January, on January 26th. The focus was to help train our paraprofessionals who are working with some of our most impacted students. A lot of our paraprofessionals are working with students with significant disabilities, learning disabilities, behavior concerns, and one of the things that they shared with us in our panorama survey in the fall is that they would appreciate more professional development on how to fine-tune their craft. So we've had the opportunity to do that twice now. We did that on the 26th of January, and we did it again today. Today we were fortunate enough to have one of our teachers from Lewis Palmer Elementary School, Nicole Dell, who's getting a degree in neurosequential model in education. I don't know what that means exactly, but she gave us a small taste of that today and helped us as educators learn a little bit more about how to identify triggers for students, challenges for students, and then how to respond. So hopefully all of our paraprofessionals left the training today with a little bit deeper toolbox on strategies and interventions to help kids. So those are the two things that we wanted to highlight today. A little bit later, we will be doing a priority 1 update in which we'll go into a little bit deeper dive on some discipline, our gaggle and safe to tell presentations as well.
And Rick, before you give up that mic, there's one more slide that we do attach within this update, and that is our updated COVID numbers if you press to the right there.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that this was an oversight or an afterthought. It's quite refreshing that this isn't one of the priorities that we talk about. I think we see we had 4 cases as of the 18th, 4 active COVID cases in the entire school district. I know Monument Academy had 3 more, but if we compare that to the numbers that we've been seeing, especially in January when we had that tremendous spike, this is becoming a non-issue in our schools right now. I don't want to minimize those who are still getting sick and struggling because it is something that we still have to pay attention to. But we've reached a point in which it's no longer a focal point, and that feels really good for us. So thank you for that reminder.
Thank you.
Good evening. I have a couple of priority 2 updates. As of today, as Mr. Frampton mentioned, we had a PLC day where teachers came together for professional development. One focus today was on bringing middle school teachers together because our 6th grade are not at the same building as the middle school. It's really important that they have time to come together to collaborate on their curriculum and the standards. And so both Dr. Brom, he led a really robust conversation with math teachers, and Miss Pam Kern coordinated training for our 6th through 8th grade teachers on our English language arts standards. And we were able to bring in a trainer with our grant dollars for that group today. Ms. Jess McAllister also facilitated our Career and Technical Education Advisory Committee early this morning at Lewis Palmer High School. We had, I want to say, I didn't count, but it looked like 30 to 40 community members and teachers coming together to collaborate on how we can partner to support our students with preparing for careers and college. She focused as well on internships for our students with our community partners. And then finally, we are launching a brand for our professional learning across District 38, which is Elevate Professional Learning. And you see our logo here, which was created with the help of Ms. Addison Hayworth, who also you met as she helped us with the portrait of the graduate, along with help from Mr. Mark Belcher. So we will be launching this logo to help market professional development opportunities for our teachers moving forward.
Thank you both, Ms. Stieber and Ms. Overton, followed by Mr. Belcher.
Good evening. So I'm really excited to update you on Priority 3. As Amber mentioned, there was a PLC day today, and we had job-alike individuals working together. Probably what we've been really busy on is this mid-year compensation increase. All of our employees have been touched by this. From an HR lens, it involves going in and touching each employee in their file, electronic file, and updating one by one. So we've gone in, and pretty soon they'll have their adjustment for their February check. We will have a consultant coming in on March 1st to our work session. She will be sharing lots of data that she's gathered in this compensation market survey. So we're really excited to present that to you at the next meeting.
Good evening. So for Priority 4, we've been, I believe it was on February 8th, we launched the Financial Advisory Committee. I think we had about 12 people in attendance, along with Dr. Summers, Board Treasurer Ron Schwartz, myself, and Mark Belcher. So they have undertaken some pretty tough assignments to start work on. We basically assigned them some objectives to start thinking about ways that they might help the district think of things from a different perspective with respect to the financial activities of the district. Payroll team has been very hard at work. In fact, I think they might still be back there working right now. But they're doing a sensational job implementing the compensation action that the board approved at our last meeting, and we're very grateful for that. It is a lot of work, and I'm very, very grateful to have the staff on hand that are working hard on that, along with Kristen's team, as she mentioned. I went through the initial Balancing Act onboarding last week, and I will start working on the initial rendition of that survey tool that will go up online hopefully in March. So basically we have to figure out in what format, in what categories we want to show the data for the district's budget as we get that Balancing Act tool implemented. So that's what I've been working on.
Thank you both. And they did a nice job of showing appreciation, but I'm just going to say one more time, the efforts at both the HR and payroll, finance and payroll team levels are just, they cannot go understated. We knew that the action that was approved was important and it was needed, and there's a lot of work that has gone into making that happen. So, and a lot of hours, both during the day and outside the regular day. And it's just a great testament to truly one team coming together. And for both Kristen and Kitty, thank you for your leadership and your grace in that. And I think they're also looking at me and saying, not that we wouldn't support our people any way you would ask us to, but that was a real hard lift. So let's do our best to keep that in front of us as we're making decisions moving forward, so we don't have all these mid-year types of changes that we're doing on the fly in the middle of everything else. So I just wanted to call that out. Mr. Belcher, priority 5.
Well, in the spirit of continuous improvement, we are endeavoring to do that through priority 5. I'm happy to announce that we have pushed forward with our Engage and Elevate sessions with the lens of going out into our community through our school sites to engage them, share information about our strategic plan, and generate feedback and support from our community. So first meeting is going to be at March 8th at Palmer Lake. That's the west point of our compass. March 30th will be Kilmer. The east point of our compass. April 12th will be Palmer Ridge, the north point, and May 4th will be Bear Creek Elementary School, which is our south point of the compass. So really looking forward to that. We've got information published on our website, but we'll also be pushing out invitations to our community, to our parents, to our staff. We endeavor to engage them all and gather all of their feedback. So that's exciting, and we're looking forward to doing that in the very near future. Also, we are looking to engage our community in additional ways. So we are working with a local partner to endeavor a community survey to engage our public and generate their opinions and truly to help inform our future decisions. We hope to, through this survey, reach a large percentage of our community, and we will have more details on that in the near future. But we are hoping that this will really just jump out to our community. We hope it will be a text-based survey solution to really increase feedback and engagement. So looking forward to sharing more details on that soon, and we'll be moving forward.
Thanks, Mark. Why don't you go ahead and take that next slide too, because I know you've had a lot of role in helping this come about. So
absolutely, I'm happy to share our February kudos. More will be published on our news website, news.lewispalmer.org. But we solicit feedback, or rather kudos, from our staff, from parents, from one another to really lift up the great work being done in our schools. And this month we have about 20 people that have been nominated for feedback. So Eric Wall, Michael Selznick, Vincent Femia, Morris Hill, Peyton Walter, Andy Stout, Devon Johnson, Jesse Kruger, Corinne Evans, Grant Krause, Jennifer Hindenberger, Jessica McAllister, Annette Bass, Mary Anderson, Michael Brom, Amber Wetstein, Mark Belcher, Michelle Jewell, Tiffany Brown, and Josh Hill. I apologize to anybody whose name I may have messed up, but congratulations to each and every one of those people. I know that they're doing great work that is elevating our district.
And Mark, I don't know if you have other duties, but if you don't mind driving just for a little bit and add that to your additional job description. So some additional noteworthy updates that we just want to capture and highlight. So the Bear Creek Reads event, which was a couple weeks ago, was just a hit. We had an author, Justin Matat, I believe I'm saying that hopefully okay, who came in, spent pretty much the whole day with our kids and with our families, and there were a variety of volunteers who spent some time reading to our children, including our very own Mrs. Upchurch. So thank you for those efforts. Kids had a really nice time and just some real neat connections that were formed during that event. As already highlighted by Mrs. Phillips, there is a new revitalized tutoring center at Lewis Palmer High School that has been reimagined and led by Laura Stamp. And our tutors are already engaging in in-depth training and have seen great results already with more than 75 client students. We have, as typical, some great shout outs and accolades for our FBLA business leaders, particularly through our Palmer Ridge squad. We had 9 who earned top 4 in regional competition and will move on to the state competition. And then 6 who also earned top 10 recognition. So big shout out to those individuals. As well as some Lewis Palmer High School students who are finalists for the National Merit Scholarship Program, seniors Anna Ike, Davis Saunders, and Allison Sobers, who are moving on to that final leg. And then, as also highlighted earlier this evening, the 15th annual chess tournament experience or event. So we had 26 different students honored across all those grade levels. And then we have one more introduction tonight that is just a quick preview. So I think, Chris, maybe just a quick wave and a handshake or hi. And we're going to do a little bit more of a thorough introduction when we get to that part of our agenda. So we're excited to welcome Chris aboard. And we believe that he is bringing just tremendous experience and a skill set that will fit our needs at exactly the right time, and how he'll be onboarding and working with Mr. Foster in that transition as Mr. Foster rides off into the retirement sunset, and Chris gets to take the lead on several different big projects and activities that are underway within our operations and facilities and all those great things that we're doing. So looking forward to a more thorough introduction in just a little bit. Chris, thanks for being here tonight. Any questions or additional comments from our board?
I have one comment.
Go for it.
So I've been trying to get around to some of the buildings in the district, and I want to say kudos and shout out to the para training. That's something that's really, really important. That's what I've heard over and over again from our staff is we need more paras. And we know there's a shortage across Colorado and across the nation, but our paras really are our boots on the ground that are taking care of our kids so that the teachers can continue with the fluid of the day. So thank you for doing that. That's great work.
Thank you for that feedback. All right, I think we're ready to keep rolling, Mr. Taylor.
Would you like a 5-minute break before we jump, or should we just jump?
Let's jump.
Let's jump.
Okay, it's snowing, or it's cold.
It's snowing.
So agenda item C1, which is priority 1, cultivate safe, healthy, and welcoming schools. Mr. Rick Frampton and Dennis Coates. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. We're here to talk tonight about, do a follow-up from our board work session on the Gaggle Safe to Tell updates that you received at the work session. We have a little bit more data and a little bit more information. We're going to talk about discipline data for the year and just give you an update on where we're at from the discipline. And then we're also going to provide you some information that you requested around national norms with our panorama data. So much of what we're going to talk about you've already seen. We're just doing a little bit deeper dive. We'll start with Gaggle. For those who don't know, Gaggle is a product that we use to monitor student activity within the Google environment. The Google environment is where our students spend the most of their time through either email or Google Documents or a Google Classroom environment. And Gaggle monitors all of the activity that students engage in the online environment through our Google. One thing we really like about this product is Gaggle of itself as the product takes all the monitoring on themselves. They use both artificial intelligence and human review process to look at all the content that goes into our Google environment, and then they send alerts to us when there's a need for those alerts. So we feel that just adds one more layer of protection and gives us an opportunity to really watch what's happening with students in the online environment.
Hey, Rick, sorry to interrupt, but Ron's having a hard time hearing. If you don't mind just speaking a little bit more direct into the mic.
Sure. Sorry, Ron. So when we look at the data, and this is what we didn't have at the work session, we've had 338 Google alerts that have occurred through Gaggle since October 1st. You can see that we have 3 different violations. The light yellow, the 90 are what are considered violations. A violation is things that we would otherwise warn students for, profanity, insults, And we bring those are brought to our attention, but they're our lowest level of concern. The darker yellow, the 226, are what's called QCon, or questionable content. Now, questionable content are items that we do have concern about, but they don't represent an imminent threat. So we are made aware of all of the QCons, and then we work with the students and the administrators in the school to assess if in fact it needs to be addressed. And then we work closely with the students to help them understand what about that content was questionable, and we use it as an educational opportunity the vast majority of time. So it's an opportunity to help kids understand the dangers of the online environment and do some coaching and guidance in that area. The 22 incidents that were reported are possible student situations. Now, the possible student situations are perceived as an imminent threat of safety for either the student or others. And when a possible student situation is flagged, the administration gets a text message and an email, and we have 5 minutes in order to respond to that text message before the Gagel organization reaches out to a second layer of support, and then to law enforcement if necessary. So when we see those texts, and Dennis and I are both on those, when we see those texts come in, we jump to and make sure that we're addressing whatever that concern is, because it could have an imminent threat as part of it. And as you see, we've had 22 of them this school year.
In those metrics, when are parents contacted?
Parents are contacted in both the QCon and the possible student situations, depending on the concern and the severity. So we do communicate regularly with parents. I don't think we would with violations, but one of the things that we take into consideration is the unique situations in which are occurring. So if we have a student who's engaging in these activities regularly, that would raise our concern in communication with parents. But if we have a imminent threat or concern, parents are notified immediately, and then with the QCons, most likely parents are at least informed that it occurred at some point as we work through that with the student, depending on the circumstance. Now, there have been some circumstances in which we would have a QCon where there's a concern around suicide, and it turns out that the student was doing a report for their health class on suicide, and actually quite a few of the 226 were legitimate reasons for them to be accessing that content. And in those cases where we just know exactly what they're working on, we know the students, we know the class, we know the content, and we don't respond to those at all. So,
A question for you. The previous work session meeting, Mr. Taylor brought up an issue of pornography and viewing inappropriate content. So where does this fit in the spectrum? Does this quantify those websites? And walk me through if parents are notified, or if there's processes in place to make that content no longer accessible by the students?
yes, if an image or even a word or sentence is identified by Gagel as being inappropriate, including pornographic content, it's immediately blocked, so there's no access to it. So it gets locked down. As soon as that happens, the staff at Gagel then review that content to see what level of concern it is. If it's pornographic, it becomes locked down, we become notified, we investigate it, and then we would respond accordingly. And that response could be from an education standpoint, like we discussed, to even a disciplinary response if it's appropriate and necessary.
So if we had a young man or young woman utilizing a Google device issued by the district, and it's repeated behavior, and there's been no action taken by this process or any administration, what advice and counsel would you offer to a parent?
Well, first of all, if it's happening on a repeated occasion, we're going to respond alongside the parent and provide greater supervision and limitation to access, and that paired with additional education and trying to understand what it is that we need to engage with that student in order to prevent that from occurring and create that educational opportunity for them to understand the risks and the dangers that are involved in consuming that material. So we work very hard to learn what's happening underneath that, explore that, investigate that, and we would work with the families too, especially if there's ongoing concerns.
So, and I didn't ask a very good question, so let me do it again. So if a family has had repeated issues with youth accessing inappropriate content on a regular basis, where are we falling short and what do we need to do better at?
We can lock that content down, first of all. That's one of the things that we have the ability to supervise, we have the ability to engage. We have filters on within our network that's going to prevent our students from being able to activate that content. So if they're receiving that content outside of school and that's brought to our attention, we can also engage by putting tighter restrictions on kids.
Yeah, I would add, I'm not exactly sure of the circumstance, but obviously if it's a parental concern that we're not catching, notifying myself or any of the administrators or the SROs, I'm not saying that there aren't ways, there are ways to skirt and probably not get on this filter, So I don't want you to think that, the words are all encompassing, that we catch everything. Kids are pretty savvy. And if there's something we're missing, I would love to know, because we can tweak our controls of how tightly we're monitoring certain kids.
Sorry for interrupting, apologize for that. So does this software prohibit VPNs or browsers within browsers?
It is monitoring all the Google activity through our network with our products, our Chromebooks, our laptops, our computers. This is unable to monitor, for example, a cell phone that a student brings in that is functioning through the internet with their cell data, for example. We do not have the ability to capture that, but if they're using district equipment on the district network, this is capturing all of that activity, or the vast majority of that activity. As far as the technical aspects about VPN and workarounds there, when Chris Mack talked to us about that at the work session, that's possible. One of the things that he mentioned that I found quite interesting is that as soon as a child finds that workaround and hits that workaround, it gets flagged and gets caught and gets shut down. So because of the active artificial intelligence and the human monitoring both, anytime that activity occurs, it gives us one more opportunity to crack down on it. I think it would be remiss to say we do it perfectly, but I think this captures the vast majority of the activity that's occurring within the school during the school day.
Okay. And for my information, once again, I'm just trying to educate myself as a parent of a child that has a Chromebook in our home. So if he or she is using my network at home, do these protocols still apply since it's a district-issued device?
Yes, we would catch inappropriate activity on a district device on your network.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it, gentlemen.
And one quick question is, I see 338 incidents. Is that 338 unique individuals, or is there repeat offenders in here?
I don't have it broken down by student. I just have the number of incidents. I can talk about the type of incidents, but I don't have it by the individual student, so I can't answer that. That's something we could mine and get to you if that's something you're wanting us to pursue further.
There are some repeat offenders in that list. It's not 338 separate students.
If we look at the types of incident, though, I can give you that. We have the types of incidents that have occurred, and you can see that suicide is referenced 95 times, which is far and away the most activated incident that GAGO finds. Profanity is a close second at 88. Violence towards others, self-harm, harassment, nudity, drug use, it runs down the line. And there's about 10 different categories where there's been one incident. We didn't list all of those, but you can get a sense on what GAGL is catching based on the number of incidents that have occurred using this data.
No offense, but I see self-harm, suicide 3, then I see up above it another self-harm. Why are those separated? And like general suicides alone, but isn't that part of self-harm? So I'm not sure I understand the
Right.
breakdown.
Gagel used to have those combined as one item, and realized, especially when talking to counselors, that the threat of suicide or talk of suicide is different than possibly cutting or other self-harm activities. And separating those two out are really helpful for our staff in assessing the severity and the need to respond and the type of response that occurs. So Gagel has broken that out for us to help with our response and the accuracy of our response.
Yeah, Rick explained it, especially if it's, 11 or 12 o'clock at night and we get something there's obviously self-harm is concerning and something we want to address, but it may not lead to the law enforcement intervention at midnight as opposed to the word suicide as an example of why they split those.
Any other questions on Gagel? Because we'll jump into Safe to Tell, which is very similar, and we have some data there as well.
The next one will be this year, but I just wanted to give you a reference point of when I started here in the district of, the Safe to Tells. Obviously, there's a lot of numbers in there, and probably Mr. Taylor is the only one that really, truly appreciates all the numbers that are up there. But going back to just a reference point, 72 back in the school year 2015, last year, the numbers were down, and that was statewide. I think COVID, and I think the fact that we really pushed more of, reaching out to counselors and more of the in-person thing probably is part of the result of that. I did not include MA's numbers in 2021 and 21-22, but no, they're approximately the same as they have been in the past. Interestingly enough, I think I submitted these to Miss Wood on Thursday night, and I believe I've probably had 12 since then. So, it fluctuates. There are times when they come in. If we go to the next one, Rick. This is this year, just to give you an idea of the number of them. I know one of the questions that I hear when you guys ask, is there anything of concern? If you average everything out, we're probably similar to on pace to years in the past. I think our self-harm, and this would include suicide, that this would be one category, is probably higher than last year and maybe the year before. But statistically, one of the things for you guys to recognize is, we talked about, 300 examples to where counselors or administrators talked with kids who may be struggling with things during our gaggle. So I think as we've expanded, and I've really tried to focus on, the last thing I ever want any of our students to feel is isolated enough to where they don't have an adult to go talk to, and they feel like their only chance is to text in their bedroom late at night that they're hurting or someone else is hurting. So we've really pushed on communicating with others. So I think if we statistically could ask how many times have counselors or myself or my team reached out to kids, that number would probably be much higher. So just to know that just because those numbers aren't necessarily higher than in years past, I do think overall, because of some of the other interventions and things that we do, that we're working hard to keep our kids safe, and I know that I'm really trying hard to encourage kids to find an adult that they can talk to and not have to. Safe to Tell has also implemented some changes over the last year or two, which have helped us. I can get into the disposition and ask the Safe to Tell to ask questions of the tipster now for that almost that real time. If there's more information I need or some clarity, that was something that's only been done during the last year, which has really helped in that, because it was frustrating and pretty time consuming sometime to figure out exactly who the Safe to Tell was about. If it was about a kid named Jim that attends our district, well, you might have to start with 38 Jameses in the district and try to narrow it down to a certain age group or somebody that's, so in order to, well, which high school do they go to? Or are they, are they an elementary age student? Or those type of clarifying questions have been a big help, and I'm glad that Safe to Tell is able to do that for us now.
What do you know about tipsters? Are they mostly students or?
I would say a high percentage. There are times when I do believe adults, probably parents, put in the request for them just based on some word usage and, some grammar that's used. I think, I think the numbers, there's been legislation and there's now an alternative where the district has, and I can reach out to our local law enforcement if there is a concern that somebody is being bullied through Safe to Tell by false accusations or false claims about that person, which is, we're pulling kids out of class, deputies are knocking on their door at midnight. If we get a pattern where we believe somebody is being bullied through Safe to Tell, there's now legislation which, if we can prove that it's somebody is using it to harm somebody else, that we can get the information of where that call came from.
But otherwise, it's confidential, right?
100%. If somebody is calling with good intent, it is 100% anonymous. If they're calling with ill intent, there's a chance they could be in trouble.
I remember when that legislation was being discussed and passed, did you say that it has decreased the Safe to Tell?
I think the percentage is better or no worse, but I do think that when we get one that's borderline and kids usually have an idea of who may have called them, when we talk to them and kind of lay it out, if you did do this or someone did this, wouldn't do it again.
Does it fall under false reporting?
It does.
Any other questions?
Just more of a comment, might turn into a question. But I recall, I think it was within the first 6 months of me being on the board, sitting down with you, Mr. Coates, and sort of getting an overview of what you do. And I think that we can look at this data, but a lot of this begins with those initial interactions that kids have with adults in our school sites day by day. And I think that it highlights for us as a district, especially as a smaller district and smaller school sites comparatively, that those interactions, whether it be with a teacher or a staff member or one of your SROs, are so vital to not even getting to this numbered graph. And then also drawing the direct correlation, if you will, with the social emotional learning component of our district and how that impacts our kids, so that as they enter the building or enter the classroom, no matter where they're coming from that morning or that afternoon, that if they are at ease, they are able to learn better. So all of this speaks to our children and having a high quality education. So I just wanted to connect that, and also to thank you, because I know you put a lot of effort into the people that you hire, and that the character of those people makes such a difference for our kids.
Yeah, and that reminds me, there's, in closing, just a reminder that to parents as they're dropping off their kids, as the roads get bad and time changes of sun up and sundown and throughout our district, to be careful and look out for our crossing guards as we go around the district. And I wanted to, although I sit here, I just wanted to give a quick recognition to all the counselors and my team and all the work that they do on a daily basis, because it's really the art of seeing that kid in the hallway and calling them in before they ever have to make a phone call that makes our team truly successful. And I think we do a great job of that.
Thank you.
I have a data question. Is it, when you're looking at these numbers, I'm looking at slide 2, when we're looking at those numbers as they, and I'm looking at them as they trend across from the self-harm and the bullying in particular, is there something to be, is there a way to find out? Look, I'm looking at the middle school and seeing that there's some increase in self-harm over time at the middle school, with a little bit down from last year, and bullying. And I'm just curious if there's can you pinpoint why? Do we know where that, if there's trends or?
My personal opinion, without being factual, but my opinion of that is I just think an open environment to report things that maybe kids didn't report in the past.
Thanks.
Any other questions on Safe to Tell? Yeah, let's move on to the current school year's discipline data. Here's the summary of the discipline based on the number of suspensions. Through Friday of last week, we've had 80 students who have received a suspension and 91 instances of suspension. So you'll notice that there have been a few repeat offenders, 11 to be exact. These numbers are not unusually high or low. It's been hard to define unusual in the fact that the last couple of years have been very unusual with the COVID impact on education. So we haven't been able to, this would be more in line with pre-COVID numbers and the pace that we've seen in pre-COVID, which is what we would expect. And if we were to look at the discipline data moving forward, one thing we are doing differently this year is we have what's called Vape Educate program. So if a student is in violation of having a vape device, whether it be being used during school or in their possession, they receive a 3-day suspension, but they can elect to have that suspension reduced down to 1 day if they choose to engage in this Vape Educate program, which is an educational program on the health impacts and the concerns with vaping for students. We've had 25 of our students elect to access the Vape Educate, reduce their suspension down to 3 days, have a 1-day suspension, and come back to school. And we're seeing, we've only had 2 repeat occurrences in our vape possession violations. So that part is feeling successful, and we're very pleased at yet again having an opportunity to use discipline as an opportunity to educate and help students understand the harmful effects of their actions and specifically vapes. And then this year we've had a total of 4 offenses in which students were up for expulsion. None of the students have gone to hearing. All 4 have elected for a deferred expulsion option. And we've worked through that with their family and have come up with a deferred expulsion agreement that met the needs of the student and warranted in the situation that occurred. So that is down considerably from where we were even pre-COVID. We've seen fewer expulsions, but spring is also one of those times when these things pick up a little bit. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Any questions on the discipline data? The last piece is we've added the percentiles from the national norms in the Panorama survey. So if you look at the engagement, sense of belonging, school climate, school safety, teacher-student relationships, and wellness for the elementary, the numbers on the left are actual percentages of favorable responses. And on the right is how we ranked from a percentile based on all the surveys that were administered across the country. One thing that's important to note is these percentiles were normed pre-COVID. So we're looking at a little bit different environment today, but you can see at the elementary level we have very favorable responses. You'll also notice that the percentiles are rounded to the tens place. So we're 80th percentile and 70th. The way Panorama articulates that is it's closest to the 70th percentile, for example, or closest to the 80th. So they do some rounding there for us. The wellness does not have a percentile because those are questions that we developed internally that haven't been normed in a national survey. And here are the secondary responses with the national norms. We are very proud of the fact that our students are feeling a sense of belonging and feeling very safe in our secondary schools. But our principals are working very closely with their school improvement plans and developing goals to ensure that engagement, school climate, and teacher-student relationships are being addressed specifically, because you can see that those are areas that we need to focus our energies on. Any questions about any of these topics?
No, but I have an anecdotal comment similar to Ms. Phillips. I hear through children and friends of children that they really like the SOR officers, and it's reflected, I think, right here, that they feel safe. And I also would say that, you know, the student-teacher relationships aren't as positive, anecdotally, is what I hear. And so it sort of is reflected there as well. I don't know if there's meaning to that, but it's consistent with what I hear, right, through that small grapevine.
Well, one of the things I mentioned in the work session that I want to reiterate this evening is we're pleased when we see that 66% have favorable responses on teacher-student relationships, and we're concerned about the 34 that didn't provide us favorable responses, and what do we need to do to focus on that population of kids to really address those concerns, because every student, every single one, until we get to 100, every single student is important, and we're seeking favorable responses in all of these areas. So that will continue to be a focus.
And Rick, once again, when did you implement the survey as a part of this monitoring process?
We administered the Panorama survey the week before Thanksgiving.
What about prior year?
This is the first year of using Panorama,
Very
so
good.
this is baseline data. We are going to re-administer it later this spring, and then we will have some good comparative data also, which is something we're really excited about.
So these results stand alone. We don't have any trend or anything like that until the future.
That's correct.
Very good.
What's included in school climate?
What's included?
Yes.
Well, I can answer that. If I can give you a few examples of,
Sure.
of a question in school climate. School climate, how positive or negative is the energy of the school is a question. How fair or unfair are the rules for students in the school? At your school, how much does the behavior of other students hurt or help your learning? How pleasant or unpleasant is the physical space in your school? So those are some examples of physical or school climate.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
This is great.
Great presentation. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
We'll move on to C2, which Lewis Palmer Middle School President Sean O'Connor will actually give us a more in-depth presentation on No Place for Hate and how it aligns with priorities 1 and 2.
So I'm going to actually do a little bit of preface or background work within this presentation. Sean, if you don't mind, sir, just helping me drive, that'd be great. Thank you for being here as well. So we felt it was important to spend time with you all on an update related to obviously quite a bit of comment that we've received from our public related to the implementation of this program. As you know, we don't typically make a habit of responding to public comment that comes forward within the scope of a specific meeting, so we did feel like this was timely given where we've been the past couple of months and some of the different things that we've heard. Our overview of this presentation, and I'll do my best to be succinct, just want to reground the conversation within policy, specific to a few that we believe are pertinent to this topic. We want to just share with you not a huge long list of everything that we're doing, but a quick overview of current character education programs within our K-12 settings. Mr. Taylor did a really nice job earlier this evening in just sharing a little bit of information related to the research around social emotional learning. So we wanted to share with you a couple of resources there specific to CASEL, which is a collaboration for academic, social, and emotional learning. And then Mr. O'Connor is here again to help put more of this work in context as it applies to No Place for Hate currently in the middle school environment. Next slide, Mr. O'Connor. So just as a reminder for all, the Non-Discrimination Equal Opportunity Policy AC provides a safe learning and working environment where all members of our school community are treated with dignity and respect. We know that we're subject to all federal and state laws and constitutional provisions prohibiting discrimination based on individual characteristic. I won't read all of those. You can see them on the slide. And then we also know that no one shall be denied the benefits of or be subjected to unlawful discrimination under any district program or activity on the basis of individual characteristics as noted. We also wanted to elevate the policy around character education, IHAK. So I'm summarizing the essence of this policy in the following bullets. Parents, we recognize, are the primary and most important moral educators of their children. We see the school and the community as partners in reinforcing those efforts. There is a provision in this policy to direct the superintendent to develop, with input from parents and other community members, a character education program. So more on that in a moment. And we also recognize the importance of all of our teachers striving to model and promote the guidelines of behavior established within said character education program. So currently, when we think about what is involved in character education programming, we are seeking to help our students cultivate skills, habits, and qualities of character that will promote an upright, moral, and desirable citizenry, and better prepare students to become positive contributors to society, including, and I don't think this is an exhaustive list necessarily, but we recognize the importance of honesty, respect, responsibility, integrity, and courtesy, respect for and compliance with the law, respect for parents, home, and community, the dignity and necessity of a strong work ethic, and conflict resolution skills. Again, not necessarily an exhaustive list there. Regarding the direction for development of a character education program, we don't have a corresponding regulation on this particular policy, and it's been some time since we've actually revisited it. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to spend some additional time in examining what our current approach to this effort is. But what I will summarize for you right now, and I think this is consistent with other policies which empower our sites and our principals in partnership with staff, with parents, and even with students to ultimately research and utilize a variety of programming options. So schools may enlist, obviously, parent input from existing parent support groups or other mechanisms for allowing for parent feedback. And we recognize that there is the natural and important process of periodic review of those programs utilizing available data, including results that correlate with program effectiveness, including climate, safety, and other perceptual data. So to your point earlier, Mrs. Phillips, there's a lot of connection and crossover here within Priority 1, Priority 2, and just the overall culture and climate within our schools. The other couple of policies I just wanted to make some quick mention of, and it's not to say that anytime we're talking about character education, that's necessarily teaching about a controversial issue. However, within policy IMBB, it is important, I think, to reiterate that if a parent or a guardian who believes that their student should not be exposed to a particular school activity, that can be requested. There is an exemption allowance, and to receive such an exemption, the parent or guardian must present a written request for that exemption to the school principal. Again, not as pertinent maybe of a policy as the other two that were just mentioned, but I do think it bears noting here. So on the next slide, we just wanted to elevate, again, some of the different programs, actually the core programs, if you will, that are currently being implemented across all of our schools with respect to different levels. So within our elementary school program, one of the core resources that is currently utilized is referred to as Responsive Classroom. And you can see the link there. Another program that is also evidenced at the elementary level is Capturing Kids' Hearts. Moving on to middle, you have Path to Empathy, No Place for Hate, and Common Sense Media. And then at the high school level, again, Capturing Kids' Hearts and Sources of Strength would be two examples there. So the point was not to necessarily go into all the details within each of these programs, but at least to allow for a starting point for additional information should people have those questions. And again, I think school administrators are best situated within each of their local schools to address individual parent questions that may be coming forth. And then just kind of reconnecting to what the recognition of social emotional learning and various programming efforts within that frame call out. This is a framework that I think actually is very helpful to illustrate, first of all, the 5 key components of social emotional learning. Now, this is defined by this collaborative. This is my best way to describe them is a research-based, evidence-focused group of educators. And what they have identified through their research is 5 essential components or competencies, if you will, within the social emotional learning framework. So that includes self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So you can see how that wheel is developed, and at the core is a focus on social emotional learning. Within classrooms. So if we think about how each of our students is welcome and supported and has access to these types of supports within each of the classrooms that they're in, then we see the next concentric circle around the school-wide culture, including practices and policies that are in place at the school level. And then the next outer ring speaks to, obviously, our close partnership and work with families and caregivers. And then lastly, how we work to provide that envelope of support from a community level and aligning all of those different learning opportunities. Please.
If I might, I would encourage anyone to go to the actual website. This is an interactive framework, and you click on any one of the areas from the core center to the 5 main areas to each of the support groups. There's more information, and you just click on each one, and it brings up and helps give further explanation of how it fits together and what the particular area is about. So it's very useful, and I found it fascinating to the point where I couldn't stop until I finished it. So
Thank you for that mention. Any other questions, comments at this point?
Can you, just the slide prior, character education programs, can you define or delineate program versus curriculum?
I would say they're synonymous. In each of these programs, you have materials, resources, suggested activities, links to everything from a lesson that a teacher may deliver to connections to how this applies within a variety of contexts. I would say more often than not, and I think Mr. O'Connor will speak a little bit to this within the context of No Place for Hate, we don't necessarily implement the program or curriculum lockstep and key in every situation. There's certainly an element of discretion and good professional judgment that is utilized as these various curricula are put into place. So again, I think it's sort of both. And I don't want to confuse too much this term, but the curriculum, as we refer to when we're adopting an academic curriculum, we know refers back to standards. Some of these programs aren't necessarily standards-based as much as they are skill-driven or perceptual-based, if you will. So it would really take us diving deep into each of those to kind of show what all that looks like. I hope that answers your question without going down too far of a rabbit hole.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I saw that we have Capturing Kids' Hearts at the elementary and then the high school. Is there a reason that we skipped Capturing Kids' Hearts for the middle school programming?
Not necessarily skipped, but I think Mr. O'Connor can speak to that.
Yeah, we've had the program in place in the past. During the pandemic, we have been unable to train our teachers, and so it just hasn't been current. We hope to be able to reinstitute this coming year.
Good noticing.
I had one question on this Castle framework
Please.
as well. Is this actually utilized at D38, or is this, because how does this relate to those areas that you say we are using?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a resource. It's a reference. It's something that we're trying to be intentional about when we think about how each of these components within the wheel play out in any particular lesson. I wouldn't say that we're necessarily espousing every piece of what it says or what it does, other than to just use it as a talking point and a reference within both a training context and just a good way to think about the why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Is there as we talked about in the work session, there's a vetting process for academic curriculum?
Correct.
Is there a similar vetting process for SEL curriculum?
So not necessarily as similar to our academic approval process. There are resources, and CASEL actually provides some nice links to considerations as we're assessing the selection and the utilization of specific curricula that are being utilized. So we haven't formalized that, Mr. Taylor, to this point, but it's certainly something that we would be open to having further discussion about.
And to that point, do you have a plan of how you are going to engage the community? You mentioned site-based, so I just wanted to see if you could add a little bit of color there.
Yeah, I think at this point in time, I would say that our site-based approach is really about empowering each of our leaders at their respective sites to make those decisions. Now, as you saw, previous slide, most of our elementary schools actually, after this coming spring, all of our elementary schools will be trained in responsive classrooms. So that would be an example of more alignment in terms of how we're making good use of our professional learning dollars, as well as creating community around some common language and application, similar to what the high school did a couple years back in the implementation of Capturing Kids' Hearts. So we had all of our high school staff trained in that approach, and you can certainly see evidence across both of our high schools there. So I don't know if that completely answered your question. I think it's certainly worth additional consideration for us to make sure that there's both consistency and coherence within whatever program we are selecting and implementing.
I think this is just speaking as one board member, that we hear from the public a wide range of thoughts and about social and emotional learning. The commonality throughout that diverse feedback is about what the child needs, right? I mean, I haven't seen one feedback that doesn't really put the child first in their input, and that's a good thing. But they also have a diverse opinion or perspective on, well, what's really best for the children. And I guess where I'm going with my thought process is I would encourage the district to make the selection process as robust as the academic process is. I think that there's room for improvement, And it's not that any of this is bad per se. I just think that when I say more robust, I know parents can come in and read curriculum, right? Before, and there's a sign-off process. There's a pretty robust process for curriculum adoption in academics. I don't know that it's the same. I honestly don't know that it's the same in the SEL area. And what I like about Castle is it's collaborative, right? Academics and social and emotional learning are really combined and should be.
I appreciate that. I don't know if there's other comments that are along those same lines, but happy to hear any other thoughts.
I just had, before we go on to the next slide, when we talked about policy IMB and IMBB, how does that apply to an SEL program? So if the parent does not want their student to participate in responsive classroom, how do they go about accessing the spirit of that policy if it's not an academic
The simplest way to do it is a conversation with the building principal. Now, as I tried to mention on that frame, I would probably have it would be a real stretch to understand what's controversial in the responsive classroom.
That was just an example.
Yeah, I guess that would beg more of a question: what exactly are those concerns? How can we make sure that we are working to address those concerns? It's just dialogue. It would be a conversation. I think it would be fair to say that there may be some activities within potential curricula that if parents were looking at that and saying, I don't know that I want my student to be exposed to it, similar to a health education course or a section of a health education curriculum along those lines. Again, it just starts with letting us know. So I hope that clarifies that. I'm not sure. I'm kind of looking for affirmation on that. That's essentially the first step. So
I think as we move further in the dialogue, I think I'll understand more too.
Sure, makes sense. I think there was one more slide just around this particular framework, and that's just the definition and the impact. And Mr. Taylor, you brought up some of the research around what the impact of social emotional learning programming has on academic performance, healthy relationships. Otherwise, I'm not going to read that definition to you. However, what I would say is everything that we want for our young people, as well as recognizing the critical role that our adults play in this equation, is what the best of social emotional learning is about. So I would go so far as to say right now, and there's actually a link to an op-ed that was recently written by me that goes a long way towards saying sometimes the terms that we use, I think, can create, for whatever reason, misunderstanding. And instead of looking at it as just the term, let's really unpack what is our approach to making sure that our young people are supported in these efforts, and that it's really, at the end of the day, not as controversial perhaps as what may be proclaimed. And then what we recognize is there's a lot of additional need for clarification and conversation where some of those questions or issues may arise. So with all of that, I do think now would be a great time to let Mr. O'Connor take us through another few slides here and talk a little bit more about No Place for Hate at Lewis Palmer Middle.
All right, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak about this, everyone. This is actually our third year with the program, and when we started 3 years ago, certainly landscape was very different, but there were still challenges, and you can bet as much contention as there is right now in our community, when our kids see that, both at a local level and a national level, it impacts them. And so you can bet they're going to struggle with it. 12, 13, 14-year-olds are far more aware than I think we give them credit. and they are thinking about and struggling with these issues. And so going back to 3 years ago, we saw a need. We saw a need because we had a change, noticed a change and a growing rise in our population and diversity, and wanting to ensure that all of our students were treated with dignity and respect, and supporting them in that endeavor. And so one of the other things that I want to speak to real quick as well, and you see the bullets up there, and I'll come back to some of those points later, but we talk about bystanders, and obviously anytime you want to address a behavior, you have to set a standard and encourage your students to meet and reach that standard and help supply behaviors that are desirable, and then follow through. One of the things that happens when you have a serious incident, and it doesn't happen, the serious incidents don't happen often, but when they happen, often there are witnesses to that event. And the kids don't know what to do, and they struggle with it. And we are dealing with kids who are in turmoil from having witnessed said event. And that's a big part of being able to set that standard. And obviously the branding of No Place for Hate, I think spoke a very powerful and strong and affirming message for all of our kids. Jumping into the next slide, when we chose No Place for Hate, I think a big operative piece for us was autonomy. It was not a canned program that you adopted and followed piece by piece. We had choice. The one item is we engage in No Place for Hate pledge. You can see some of the bullets that are part of that pledge up on the screen, and the students are invited to sign a pledge, but all of the activities that we actually do with the program, we choose, and we choose that with a collaboration with our student group who, again, elected to engage in the training with the No Place for Hate trainers, and then they help us design and include and create activities for our school. Some of those were mentioned earlier by one of our speakers, so I don't want to take too much time, but these are activities, again, that students can opt into. For example, the quotes on the chalkboard are just something that are there that students can choose to read. The question of the week is an activity that students can participate in or not. We've had game nights, and the goal is just to create an environment of inclusivity. All right, I'm going to jump into that next slide. Want to make sure we address some of the misconceptions that might exist. And certainly acknowledge that Anti-Defamation League has a role in the creation of this program. We do not share any data or information with them about our school or students and that type of information at all. We do have, as part of the process, we share what our activities are that we engage in with our kids, but that's it. One thing that I want to say as I kind of go back to the why behind this with bullying, you want to be able to give and empower students, and we've been able to do that. The students that presented to the board, what was that, November, I think? It has empowered them and given them voice. And a lot of people spoke about that tonight. And I want to further that and talk to you just a little bit about helping to change the dynamic from being a victim of these incidents and being able to be an active change to what happens. And instead of always taking on that victim mentality, being able to do something. And this has empowered many of those students in a positive way. So it's been powerful that way for our kids. And I think those kids, and we had one parent that was in the program speak about that, certainly feel the welcomeness and the change. The last thing that I would say there is with the way that we use No Place for Hate, I'd have a hard time calling that a curriculum. There's not instructional lessons that our teachers are delivering to students. We're engaging in an activity with the pledge and then offering activities to our students throughout the year to join with us. And I think that's where I would stop.
Would you consider that experiential learning then?
Yeah, often.
And I don't know why you wouldn't refer to that as a curriculum, because it is a framework for experiential learning, correct?
Yeah, these are opt-in opportunities, and typically they're participant-based activities. Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions. How many clubs or extracurricular organizations exist at Lewis Palmer Middle School?
Several. Off the top of my head, I mean, it's not as robust as you might see at the high schools, but we have several.
Dozen?
Yeah.
So do they all get, kind of an equal amount of publicity and recruitment, if you will?
Through the school, yes.
Yeah. So all these different extracurricular activities are presented equally to all students for their participation or not.
Correct.
No one is required to participate, right?
Correct.
There's been a lot of feedback from the community about I'm going to use the term that I've most commonly heard, Rainbow Coalition, and its signage, if you will. That's just one of the clubs, is that correct? Or is it not? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we do have a GSA club.
Okay,
Yeah.
So it's just one of a dozen or so clubs.
Correct.
And they have as much right and time to recruit and do whatever they do as any others.
Correct.
Okay. And again, no compulsion for anyone to participate or not. Okay.
That's correct.
Have you seen bullying as a result of club membership?
I think in the way and in the spirit of how you're asking, no. I think there certainly can be times where some kids may, if they have chosen to identify with that group, may receive negative comments, that type of thing. That has happened, but in terms of for being in a club, no.
Well, the context for my question is what I hear from the public, and I hear parents here tonight saying that some of their kids are said they might as well kill themselves. I mean, I hear some very ugly things being said. My question I didn't think was that complicated. I was just saying, because people are a member of a club, whatever that club is there bullying associated with that?
There can be, depending on the club.
And it was more of a direct question to you. Have you observed, or are you seeing it in the middle school specifically?
I think we have isolated incidents that occur and that we follow up on, yes.
I have just one comment then. Those are my questions. My comment is, I'm going to come back to this whole concept that there is a curriculum around social and emotional learning. Whether you define it as, or being taught as curriculum, there's such a thing as experiential learning, and that is curriculum or a framework based. So I just want to point that out, and then also just say that on its face, No Place for Hate doesn't sound like we're building on students' strengths. And I really believe that every child has many more strengths than they do need intervention. And No Place for Hate sounds like intervention to me. And it's just my perspective on it. I'm throwing it out there so you'll consider it in how it's being utilized. But if we focus on children's strengths and not worry so much about the intervention aspect, that doesn't mean you don't have to intervene. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not saying, oh yeah, we can just let everything go. The point being is, what's the focus? The focus, again, needs to be the good that is in these, their strengths, whatever those strengths are. And I, as one board member, will do all I can within our work sessions and within the board itself to encourage this school district to focus on SEL curriculum that focuses on the strengths of these kids, first and foremost, knowing that intervention is required as a framework for SEL. Any other comments or questions from the board?
I have some. Teresa, do you want to go first? No, go ahead. Okay. So I think of, when you think of strength, when I think of strength, I immediately think of sources of strength, for example. I'm just going to read off a little bit. Chess Club, Coffee with Christ, Cooking Club, Cyber Patriots, Barebotics, Fellowship with Christian Athletes, Gay Straight Alliance, Patriot Enrichment Program, Prayer Group, Where Everybody Belongs, Girls on the Run, Knowledge Bowl, Astronomy Club, Bad Movies Club, Esports and Gaming Club. The reason I'm reading this is the point I'm trying to make is when I'm looking at this on two different hands, it's a constitutional right, as outlined in the First Amendment, to have freedoms of association. So students finding activities and groups during after-school meetings in their own space to feel togetherness and belonging is inspiring. And those, I heard those words from you, Mr. O'Connor, so thank you for those words. Based on the feedback that I've received or what I'm hearing, and I could be very wrong, from parents and community members, almost all have expressed that the idea of anti-bullying initiatives and character building are not what they're taking issue with, and many have shared that they agree actually with the program's intended goals, such as harmony and bravery and eradicating racism. But I think what they're expressing dissatisfaction with is the tool or the resource. I personally do agree with you, Mr. O'Connor, that the goal of the program is to help students seek and be respectful of other perspectives and to expect that we treat each other with decency and respect. And I think that the ADL, where we're coming down to it, is it is a controversial tool. They lobby nationally, they lobby Washington, they lobby locally, and both sides of the political spectrum, if you will, take issue. You've got one side that takes issue that they lobby for better United States and Israel relationships. And then you have the others, and that they are a little anti-Islamic. And then you have the other side that they don't like that they're engaged in political lawsuits, and they've lost lawsuits here in Colorado for violating privacy. That's just the way it is. So I think that that's what I'm hearing from the complaints. Speaking on behalf of different community members, and again, I could be wrong, I'm just putting it out there that I think that it's not the idea, and I think that we absolutely 100% owe it to our students to honor them and celebrate them where they are and who they are, and be their voice. And regardless of where they are, regardless of where they are on the spectrum, I like the question, what color are you today? I like that color. I mean, I like that question. My point being that I'm not hearing people say we should absolutely not honor our students, but I know there's voices out there that say that, probably. I'm sure there are, but that's not my perspective. I'm just sharing. I'm wondering if maybe there's something we look at where next year or the year after where we're still doing the good work that needs to be done in this, and the need for it is obviously there. And maybe it's ADL, I don't know. Maybe it's something else that's a little more affirming, I don't know.
Matt, any comments? Teresa? Sorry, I rambled. Ron?
Sorry, I rambled.
Nothing here, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Thank you very much. And thanks for all the good work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean. Chris, I was going to share within my own students circle of friends when they look around the classroom, and I've asked, what does no place for hate mean to you? And they've expressed what no place for hate means to them is treating each other with equal dignity and respect. They don't see it as a negative. They see it as trying to honor and lift each other up.
Can I offer one more thought, Mr. Taylor? I was just doing a little bit of refreshing on what our robust approach is to adopting academic curriculum. And in light of the fact that policy IHAK does not currently have a corresponding regulation, what I would like to spend some time on is designing more of that for additional consideration, keeping in mind that's less of a policy shift, it's more of a deepening of our commitments and our understanding of what we're striving for, given the aspirations that we have in terms of character education and social emotional learning programming. So I think that's well worth the effort. I'd love to say that we could develop that in a short timeline. My sense would be it would take us a few months to really put some good thought into that, and then have something that we could revisit perhaps before the end of this school year or at the beginning of next, and really spending some more time revisiting this issue with you all.
I appreciate your deliberate approach, because that's the right way to do this. It isn't a quick fix. It needs to be well thought out and aligned with everything that we stand for. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Let's move on to C3. It's a priority update for student achievement and growth. Amber, welcome. Again. And you'll need to move the mic
See if I can
towards you.
figure out how to find it on here. There we go. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you a mid-year update on how our students are achieving and growing. I did invite a couple of Learning Services team members here, so Dr. Brahm and Pam Kern are here. If we have specific questions, they may jump in and help answer some of those as we go. I will warn you, for almost 8:30 in the evening, I'm going to be giving you a lot of data, and so I'm going to start high level, and then we can go deeper if you want to. So just know, ask me questions or tell me to back up if I go too quickly. Here are the relevant policies that are of note for our presentation this evening. And for reference, we do several assessments or tests with students. These primarily focus on reading and math, although we also do have science in a couple of grade levels with our state testing. But we test our students in the fall, the winter, and then the spring, and this is how we can identify leading indicators of how we believe our students will or will not reach their goals for the year. And then typically at the end of the year, we take our state assessments and we're able to look at those summative assessment results. Tonight we'll be focusing primarily on the Acadience assessment, which is our early literacy assessment, also known as DIBELS, and then our NWEA MAP assessment, reading and math. I'll also provide you a some high-level results on how our high school students did this fall on their college readiness assessments. We don't assess those skills at mid-year. Some considerations before we look at the literacy results. We know in our own district and across our state and nation, our students that are the youngest learners were significantly impacted. And so we did see those impacts with our students who were learning to read. It's very important that students have consistent instruction, especially when they're beginning to read. Even though we were open, there were quarantines, there was inconsistency in instruction. And we also know that we are implementing new literacy resources in our elementary schools this year. And our data that you'll see here in a moment is mirroring what the state trends were showing. We also want you to know that our schools are using data-driven instruction as well as interventions to catch kids up from the learning loss that they may have experienced. So what you'll see first on these first slides are Colorado statewide results. And this data, we provide our data along with other schools across Colorado who participate in the ELAT project. It's the Early Literacy Assessment Tool Grant project that allows us to use these assessments at no cost. And it is a required assessment that we give to all kindergarten through third grade students. And the boxes that are highlighted show you where our students were performing mid-year, so about December, January timeframe, back right before the pandemic, and then where they are performing as of December, January now. And this again is Colorado. So you'll see the red and the yellow indicate students who are not at benchmark or where they should be by that time in kindergarten. And then the green and the blue is at or above benchmark. So you can see for kindergarten statewide, we are a little bit behind where we were pre-pandemic, but not significantly.
A quick question. What's boy versus moy?
Beginning of year, middle of year, and yeah, so this just shows beginning to mid. So you can see the beginning of the 1920 school year to the mid point of that school year. So this is representing 3 academic school years. Good question. Okay, so again, our kindergartners were less impacted, first grade a little bit more so, and second grade slightly impacted across Colorado as well.
Sorry to interrupt. It's actually from Mr. Schwartz. He wants to know what percentage of the student population was surveyed.
So the numbers, I don't know the percentage. There are only a couple of tests that schools can choose to give. Acadience is the most popular, I would say. So the majority of kindergarten through third grade students across our state would be included in this data, but not all, because there are a few other options of assessments.
And within our district?
Within our district, it's all students.
Okay.
We are required by law to test every kindergartner through third grade student at the beginning, middle, and end of the year. Good question. Okay, and then third grade, you can see the impact there statewide. Transitioning to our data, you can see that back in the 1920 school year, our students in kindergarten were performing slightly better than they are now. But overall, you'll see with all of the data that I've provided you in these slides that our district was performing at a higher level than statewide pre-pandemic and has caught up quicker to where we were pre-pandemic now. We do still have some catching up to do, though. So with
Is the trend we see in 2021, where we've got beginning of the year, mid-year, and end of year, is that typical every year that they improve through the course of the year in these various subjects?
It is, yes. And that's what we would want as our students come through our system. They're learning and growing. And then second grade, a little bit less gap there as well. We do still have a slight gap to catch up to where we were pre-pandemic. And same with third grade, although it's very minimal. So that's a celebration. We are seeing that our students are resilient, and we are making headway, even though we do still have, when you look at those percentages, we have students who are not where they need to be academically, and we are addressing that through the new core curriculum as well as interventions to support those students' needs.
But without exception, in all of these slides, what I'm seeing is this year, beginning of the year, end of year, or mid-year, sorry, is better than last year across the board.
Yes, I'd have to take a microscope and analyze it a
It's
little
true,
bit more.
I promise.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that is worth just noting is that year 2021, so when we went to online in the spring of 2020, then those students who came back in the fall of 2020, that's where everything is shifted to the right. That's where the highest numbers of more struggling students would be, for lack of a better term. Is that
Right,
accurate?
and that matches the state's data as
Yeah,
well.
but it looks like now, this year, there is some recovery from that already.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, I just wanted to reference this growth tool. This is a spreadsheet that we use at the district level, but then each school has their own version of this, and schools are able to set goals for how they want to grow students from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And so what you're seeing here, the percentages, we set a goal to have above average progress. I wish I had a pointer. I don't know if this points or not, but the beginning of year percentage shows where our students, how many students were at benchmark or where they needed to be at the very beginning of the year. And then the next two columns, the goal range, shows where we would have needed to get by mid-year and then end of year to have our students grow above average progress. So you can see with those numbers, we are on track for meeting those goals for kindergarten and third grade, and just slightly behind with first grade and second grade. But we've been meeting with principals, and they have action plans in place so that we can recover that growth before the end of the year to meet those goals. That's our hope.
Amber, Mr. Schwartz had a follow-on question. Ron?
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? I just want to be respectful of the mic.
Yes, we can.
All right, so two quick questions. Thank you for this data, Amber. It's very comprehensive. On the previous slide, can we conclude from it that in-person learning yields better results than remote?
I think we can conclude that from a lot of different data. I'm not certain which of the schools across Colorado were in person and which were remote, but we can certainly attribute all of the efforts that our teachers have been taking now to catch kids up. Some of the students in this data were remote during the pandemic. But I think that the data is conclusive across our nation that students do need in-person learning.
Okay. And my second question is on the current slide you're on. And the benchmark that we're referring to. The two questions. What is the benchmark? And if you said it previously, I apologize, I just couldn't hear it correctly. And the second one is, what's the benchmark for the top 10% in the country?
So those are good questions. This particular assessment doesn't set a benchmark for the top 10%. It is designed to be an indicator of if a student will be successful during the next iteration of the assessment. It's a nationally normed assessment that has a scale score, if you will, that is a benchmark score. You might use the term proficiency, but it's a score that a student would need to achieve at each assessment point. and then that would indicate their likelihood of being successful at the next assessment point.
I guess where I'm trying to go, thank you. I guess where I'm trying to go is if our goal is world-class education, that's likely in the top 10 or 15%, at least of our country. And while we have this great data, can we at least know what our objective looks like and what the target is we're shooting for?
I think the MAP assessment data would be a better indicator of how we compare nationally than what this particular early literacy assessment would do.
And this one is reading?
Correct, and these are early reading skills, so looking at how students can sound out words and read fluently at an early level.
All right, it's not writing, just reading, correct?
Correct.
So ultimately where I'm trying to go with this is world-class education is a tremendous, wonderful, and correct goal to distinguish our districts, at least on the academic and hopefully the social side as well, from our peers, and continue to maintain the greatness of our district. As we look at these type of things, can we leverage what's here so we have something to shoot for? And then the goal becomes less esoteric and more exact.
Yes, and I think with this particular tool, we're looking to, it's more of wanting our students to grow. And when we're setting these above average progress growth goals, that is where we're trying to have our students grow more at a higher rate, if you will, than students across the state and nation. And so we do have those numbers, those percentages, which would be the end of
That's
your
assuming the average in the
benchmark.
state is the average in the country.
Well, we could probably get the national numbers for this particular assessment. It just wouldn't be what I've shown this evening, because that data is compiled for the schools that are participating in Colorado's program. But this is an assessment that is widely used across the nation. I will just caution, though, it isn't intended to rank districts. It's really intended to predict if a student will be successful at the next testing point. So I think the next data set that we'll talk about will speak more to what you're looking for, Mr. Schwartz. Do you want?
Yeah, thank you, and fully understand that this may not be the right day to have this conversation. I just wanted to prep the other board members that there's an opportunity here for us to leverage what's in this data instead of doing a whole new project to get to our objectives that the team has set for a world-class education.
So Ron, real quick, because I think it's a great frame for discussion. I think another way to approach this data is recognizing that every student will have an individual range of growth that we are striving for, given what their measure of achievement was at the most previous window. So in other words, we can track how many of our kids have met or exceeded their growth, which is essentially how this data is lined up. And what I would say is our target, without probably talking too much out of turn here, is we want every student to meet those growth targets, which should be represented then in essentially on track and other mechanisms that speak to growth across all of our students that are being assessed on this tool. So that might be another way to frame. It's not necessarily neatly packaged that way right now, but that would be another way to ensure that every student is making the growth that we are setting as a result of these, as a result of current performance and what we need to do in order to ensure that all students are making adequate growth. Keeping in mind that there are a lot of variables that go into that. So I don't know if that helps, Ms. Wetstein, but that's another way to maybe couch this.
But I think what Amber's saying is these next slides will get us there when we get into the map.
Sure.
There will be national comparisons. Yes. Okay, so the similar looking slide provides the same information, but these are students who were scoring well below benchmark, and we want to reduce that number. So you can see that we are reducing that number, and we are on track to have above average progress for growth for every grade level, very close with second grade there. Okay, so then transitioning to the measures of academic performance, or the MAP reading results. This shows national percentile rank. So to Mr. Schwartz's comments and questions, these data reflect the lighter blue line in the achievement column reflects where students were achieving with their percentile rank compared nationally from the beginning of the year to the end of the year before the pandemic at mid-year 1920, and then mid-year this school year 21-22. So you can see that our achievement is very high at all grade levels. Again, this is reading. There were a couple of grade levels that did not have data back in 1920. For whatever reason, it could have been that they didn't complete the assessments prior to maybe having school closures in January, or I guess that would have been March. But for whatever reason, they didn't have data that year. But this year, all grade levels have tested beginning of the year and mid-year, so you can see where students began the year with their achievement and then, for the most part, grew. And also keep in mind that those skill levels increase as students progress throughout the year. So there were a couple of grade levels that were fairly flat in their achievement, but know that we would expect higher levels of skill at mid-year than at the beginning of the year, and the percentile rank of how we compared nationally still is very high at all of those grade levels. The bars in the growth column show what our median growth percentiles were. So how we were growing students, and we would want that to be at a minimum of the 50th percentile. That's where we would expect our students to grow. And you can see that pre-pandemic, there were several areas that we were exceeding that. There are still several areas that we are exceeding that, but there are some grade levels where we are not seeing the growth we might expect in reading.
Can I ask a question? When I'm looking at the bars, so we're going grades 1 through 8 on this one, K8. Is there a reason that 7 and 8 don't have the 2019, 2020?
Yeah, I'm not sure why they didn't test that year. I don't know if Dr. Braun may have some insights to that.
I can speak to that. Thank you. So back in 2019, 2020 at the middle school, it was primarily a fall-spring assessment comparison. And over the last 2 years, there's been conversation about incorporating the winter MAP assessment as well, so that we can find out our students on track to meet their growth metrics in the spring. And so that's why we don't have that data in 2019-20, but we have increased participation in the winter for grades 7 and 8 in both reading and math over the last 2 years.
Makes sense. Thanks.
And this This slide just shows that data a little bit differently. Again, this is 19-20 and then 21-22 reading map growth results. And the bars indicate how much our students grew, and the diamonds indicate where we would have expected them to grow. So we are falling short in just a couple of areas this year. And again, that is with our growth, while our achievement still remains high. Okay, and then we also provided you with our math results for the MAP assessment. And again, you'll see our national percentile ranking for achievement. It is below where it was pre-pandemic, but we are catching up. And then you'll see our growth results here as well. And the slide with the diamonds indicating where we would have expected our growth to be for each grade level.
If I'm reading that right, this year's for math is a great improvement from 2 years ago, right?
We're hitting those targets closer to where we were for how our students are growing.
And likewise, if I look at grade 6 this year, I would go back to grade 4 to say those are about the same students, right? 2 years. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yes, but again, this is growth and not achievement. So students would be growing, maybe learning more, you might say, within a given time frame this year than they might have as fourth graders during that same amount of time.
What I'm looking at, though, is if I look at 4 2 years ago and 6 this year, the diamond is right near the top of the book, right? So there's similar results. If I look at grade 3 to grade 5, that's a huge improvement, right? Am I reading that right? Close?
Yes, they're not necessarily the exact same kids, and there's a lot of factors, but yes, you could say that group of students is hitting their growth targets at a much higher rate this year than they were 2 years ago. Okay, and then as I mentioned, we don't do mid-year testing for high school, but I wanted to provide you some information on the beginning of the year assessment results for our high school students. These are assessments that align with the expectations for PSAT and SAT that we give students in the fall, so that teachers can inform their instruction to prepare students for end-of-year expectations. And these are mean or average national percentile ranks for these scores. You could look at this as well. These are fall 2020 to fall 2021, so this is not pre-pandemic data. But you could essentially, as you were saying, Mr. Taylor, follow, for example, the students who took PSAT 9 last year and go diagonal and see that they then were at the 60th percentile this year on the PSAT 10. We do typically see a slight drop from the PSAT 10 to the SAT. However, at the end of the year when our students take the SAT, we typically have very high success rates. That was a lot of information. So what questions or other discussion do you
I have one comment. Wow. That's a lot. Comments or questions?
Nope.
Lots of data. Good.
I have one question, if possible.
Please.
Ms. Wetzstein, what do you think of this data on a macro basis? In a sentence or less?
I think that we are making great gains with our students who have been through a lot over the past couple of years. We have a lot to celebrate, and we still have work to do. So we are going to keep working and keep supporting our teachers so that we're continuing to grow every student every day.
So it sounds like you're saying this is a good establishment of positive forward momentum, and we're not stopping here. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Can I say good answer? That's a really good answer.
Really good.
Don't worry, I'm going back on mute, I promise.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's jump ahead to C4, Priority 2 update. Consider approve world language and health curriculum. I'd like to make a motion to approve the purchase of world language curriculum resources for Spanish, German, and French, and update Glencoe Health curriculum for 9th grade as presented.
Second.
Comments and questions?
So I just have a comment. As Mrs. Wetstein knows, I was in, and I also looked at the curriculum, and I thought it was good, well-rounded curriculum. I thought it was just basics. It was straightforward. It was the critical thinking pieces of it in the health curriculum were good critical pieces, and I thought it was good curriculum.
Good. Teresa, anything?
Sorry.
No.
I just wanted to note that we're jumping from edition 2014 up to 2022, so that's an 8-year jump.
Yep. Yeah, we did have 12 community members come and review the curriculum, and I believe there were 6 that left comments, and those are included in the board packet.
Excellent. Ms. Woods, would you call the vote?
Mr. Clausen?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch?
Aye.
Excellent. Moving on to C5, Priority Update 3, consider approved contract for Executive Director of Operations and Development. And I'd like to start with a motion to approve the contract for Mr. Chris Coulter, Executive Director of Operations and Development, to begin March 1, 2022.
I'll second the motion.
Comments, questions, and introduction? Is this the time?
So I have a lot to say about this hire, but in the interest of time, I'm going to keep it very brief. However, I would like to welcome Chris up. Could you come up for a minute, Mr. Coulter? First thing I'd just like to say is we had a very robust applicant pool for this role. And a very rigorous selection process. And we had several candidates who emerged as potential fits for this role. But I'm very excited that we are in a position to offer this contract to Mr. Coulter. I would like to just highlight a few of his accomplishments and just some background because I think it's germane to this action. And again, I'll try to just highlight the big stuff. So Chris's education background includes a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from Purdue, including a Bachelor's of Science of Engineering from DePauw, as well as a Master's of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Colorado in Boulder. His most recent role, he's coming to us from Arizona. He did not bring the weather with him, at least so far, but he was the Executive Director of Capital Programs and the Management Group at Arizona State. I'm working backwards here. Prior to that, he was an Associate Vice President of Facility Services at Colorado College in our very own Colorado Springs, and that was a position I believe he held for 8 years. And then prior to that, and we won't hold this against him, he had several years of experience as the Executive Director for Construction Facilities and Sustainability in Academy District 20. Chris has extensive military background and experience. He has about as many letters behind his name as you can possibly have, I think, in this role, including project manager, management professional, lead accredited professional, facility manager. He was the ACC Military Design Engineer of the Year in 1998. Council of Educational Facility Planners member. The list goes on. He is also a resident of our great state and graduated, I believe, Rampart. I'm not going to date you. I won't give that year. And I believe his father actually spent some time on the board in District 20, if I'm not mistaken. So, Chris, we're very excited to bring you on board. As I mentioned earlier, we have a tall task in working to fill this role left vacant by Mr. Foster. It's not left vacant yet, so we're excited that there's a transition plan that can start as early as now to bring Chris on board and download or upload all of Bob's extensive knowledge of our systems and our work that's happening, and Chris will be in a position where he can be side by side and shadow that work for the next few months and then really hit the ground running as we're working into the summer and the beginning of the school year. So with all of that said, I'm very excited to present him to you all this evening, and this may be an opportunity for him to say a few words, if that's okay, Mr. Taylor.
That would be great.
Well, I'll tell you what, thank you so much.
You want to grab the mic?
Oh, I don't know, people don't give me a mic very often. Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, be back in Colorado Springs. I feel like this is my home. Feel like this is certainly where I've grown up and spent an awful lot of time doing various different things. I'm a high energy, positive attitude type of leader. I look very much forward to this opportunity. I see this as an answered prayer for both myself and my family. We are very, very excited to be again back in Colorado Springs, and I will continue to try to do everything I can to sort of develop and continue and further what I have learned in the nearly 2 decades of facility management that I have been a part of. And certainly there's been a lot of ups and downs and learning curves associated with that in all different facets of the facilities spectrum. But again, I spent half my day today over at Palmer Ridge, and we're going to try to figure things out over there just as quickly as possible. I do have quite a bit of experience in geothermal, and so I can't wait. I mean, I'm very, very excited about the opportunity, and I can't wait to get started.
That was my question. Do you have any background?
I do. I got a lot of it, and so yeah, I can't wait to spend some opportunity. And I was glad that was one of the questions actually in the interview. So it wasn't a technical question, but it was, hey, how comfortable are you with geothermal? So I felt like I see this as an opportunity, and I will continue to obviously try to do what I can relative to new construction, renovations, capital renewal, and those types of things, as well as sustainability. I was a big part of it at Colorado College. Colorado College being able to declare carbon neutrality it was right when I left Colorado College. It just sort of timed out that way. But certainly see some opportunities there for both the students, for the faculty, or for the students and the teachers, and everything that's going on. Let's save some money.
Nice.
Welcome. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, I would like to just make a comment. Chris, it's nice to see you. And as one board member, I'd like to welcome you aboard, and also just to let my fellow board members know, when I first read the board packet, I thought maybe there was more than one Chris Coulter in the world, but Chris is a former coach of my oldest son in basketball, and I was really quite happy to see your name pop up, and I can vouch that he is definitely a person of integrity, and you've made a great hire. So Chris, welcome aboard.
That's good to know. Thank you.
And Teresa, to your point, there are several Chris Coulters out there. We did a social media scan, and this Chris Coulter, I can tell you, is squeaky clean. So he is. Everything is advertised.
Well, and I made the recognition when I walked in tonight. So thank you for being here, and thank you for staying for such a long meeting as well.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we vote, Ms. Stuber, is there anything else that you wanted to bring up in this agenda item? Because your name's listed, and I just want to make sure we're not skipping anything. No, I think Dr. Summers did okay. Okay. Very good. Then, Ms. Wood, could you call the vote?
Mr. Clausen.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Schwartz.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Aye, aye.
Ms. Upchurch.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Our next section is C6, Financial Planning and Analysis.
While Kitty's up here, coming up, I just saw that we have made an announcement.
Yeah, I apologize for my texting behavior, but there's a lot going on in the weather realm, and we just had to announce a closure for tomorrow. So thank you for that plug, Mrs. Upchurch. Appreciate that.
I understand the roads are getting pretty bad outside, so if we could wrap it up, that would be.
Understood. I have a long way to travel myself, so thanks, Mr. Klassen. Appreciate that.
So I think to that point, does anybody have any questions? These are standard monthly slides, and I hope we've all had a chance to look at it. And if there are no questions, I mean, the growth hasn't changed month over month. It's pretty standard, it looks like to me. So, Kitty,
Right?
that's quick.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Well done, thank you.
Excellent, excellent.
We're going to move on to C7.
This is an epic meeting.
Oh, you did get some extra steps in.
Consider approved revisions to policy IKF, graduation requirements. Amber, we just can't get enough of you this evening. Do we have any, I'm going to make a motion to start with. I'd like to make a motion to approve the revisions to policy IKF, graduation requirements as presented.
I'll
Second.
that. Can't get that done quick enough.
Yeah, Amber, anything else you want to add to this? We've been through it in work sessions, et cetera.
I don't have any new information to provide.
Okay, any comments or questions?
Nope.
Please call the vote.
Aye.
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 Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
Comments, questions? Anything you want to pull out, discuss? If not, Ms. Wood, would you call the vote?
Aye.
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 Okay, I would like to make a motion to meet in executive session to discuss the superintendent's evaluation of personnel matter in accordance with Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402, subpart 4, subpart F, subpart I.
Oh, we need to second the motion. Second the motion. I'll second the motion.
Any questions, comments, concerns?
Nope.
Ms. Wood?
Aye.
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 And Ron, we'll call you from the meeting when we get assembled, and after which we will not return here, so this would be an adjournment of our monthly board meeting. Thank you.